I call to order now the City of Indianola City Council meeting, May 2nd, 2022. If we will all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
call the roll.
Councilmember Hewlin. Here. Parker.
Present.
Dalby.
Here.
Schroeder.
Here.
Feach. Here. Richardson.
I'm just gonna stay. Perfect. And you have me sign this, John. This is the tricky part.
Right.
I'm fired. Now we're gonna be great. Oh, yeah. Don't go too far. The press is like a picture of both of you, right? Eyes ahead.
All right. Top that.
I think I can do a little bit better. So I'll raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Isaiah Strong, do solemnly swear
I, Isaiah Strong, do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Iowa,
and the Constitution of the State of Iowa,
and that I will faithfully and impartially,
and that I will faithfully and partially,
to the best of my ability, discharge
to the best of my ability, discharge
all the duties of a police officer of the City of Indianola, Iowa,
all the duties of a police officer of Indianola, Iowa,
as now or hereafter required by law.
as now or hereafter required by law.
Congratulations. You're so short. I know.
Killing me, That it does.
Great, Jim. Yeah, come on.
No one's here for me.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, Brian.
Listen, try to repeat. It's supposed to be who's restricted.
The official ED for Saturday.
There we go.
Thank you. Welcome aboard.
Yeah.
Welcome to the first exciting session.
Yep. Just on the line. Just sign it.
Right, we will move in to public comment. Now, if you would like to address the council on something that is not on the agenda, we'll have you come forward now, state your name and address. However, if you're here to talk on a specific item, particularly library, city hall, or public safety, we'll welcome that comment when we get to that agenda item. But otherwise, feel free to come to the podium if you have something to say.
Good evening. My name is Al Ferris. I live at 811 East Salem. Some of you know I'm also on the Planning and Zoning Council Commission. At our last meeting, we recommended to the City Council, to you, 4 different plats totaling almost 106 lots. It made me think once again, and some of you've heard me say it before, about parks. We're not developing parks to go along with these new housing developments. As far as I could determine, the last new park in Indianola was in 2007 or 2008, and that's the Nelski Park, which is not near any growth area. And I believe it was a gift to the city. The city didn't have to pay anything for it. In the recently completed comprehensive plan, there are some dots on the map where parks should be, but that's all they are. It's dots on the map. I understand there's going to be a parks master plan developed in the near future. And I want it to be more than more dots on a map. I want to see some actual parks. I hope you take the responsibility and come up with some mechanisms to make those parks a reality. Either include them in the budget, so you buy the land, develop a program that requires developers to donate land as a part of the development, or develop a program to have developers put money into a pot that then you can use in the future to buy parkland. Just for the heck of it, there's a development north of Hillcrest, out along the bike trail. I went out there to the furthest north house in my car, and I started driving south to see how far it was to the closest park. Councilman Parker may know where it is. It's either Easton Park or Barker Park. It's over 1.5 miles, and any child going there has to cross Hillcrest and Iowa Avenue to get there. I don't think that's acceptable. I don't think that's where we want to be in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good point.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak? All right, we will move on to the consent agenda. Is there any items that need to be pulled?
Mayor, I need to pull item B, claims.
Anything else?
I'd also like to pull 6J.
Okay. Anything else? All right, we will go ahead and approve everything except for B, 6B, approval of claims, and 6J, and come back to those. Can I get a motion to approve?
I'd so move approval, but I'd like Charlie just to kind of run through those quickly if you would.
Absolutely. Can I get a second, and then we'll come
Second.
into. All right, Charlie, you want to run through the.
Just
consent
quick
agenda?
summary, yeah, on the items that are on the consent agenda first. A lot of items necessary to enact Friday Night Live, the concert series at Memorial Park. Just a few specific things there with noise ordinance applications, liquor license applications and things like that. The other thing is there's various things on there related to staff as we get into a new budget year here. One of them is health insurance renewals. The council and I had a joint meeting about that a few weeks ago. The classification and compensation study for staff, that's something as we discussed with council when we were discussing salaries this year that we were planning on doing. So we are accepting the RFP on that. And then the police union contract, again, something that council has been talking about now for a few months, and that's just approving that contract formally.
Any other questions on that?
I just have one last thing, and I don't want to take a lot of time, but on the truck for the public works, I saw that was an increase due to basically not being able to get stuff, the parts and things like that. And there was a clause in there, is that right? That was an escalation clause in case it did escalate. That's what I thought. Okay.
Yeah, and AP is on Zoom, and I can have him clarify anything that I'm misstating, but I believe that is the
Yeah,
case. Yeah.
I couldn't remember if I saw that. Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Have we purchased from them before?
I'll defer to AP on that one as well. AP, are you?
Yep, Mayor and Council, this is AP. We have not purchased from Volvo before. This is our first purchase with them. But having said that, I've consulted with multiple cities or neighboring cities, and everybody is facing the same problem, where the price of trucks has gone up because of the global supply chain demand.
I just want to make sure there was an escalation clause in there, so
That is correct.
Yeah, there was. Okay.
Right, any other questions, comments?
Thank you, AP.
Jackie, would you call the roll?
Councilmember Hewlin,
Aye.
Parker,
Aye.
Dalby,
Aye.
Schroeder,
Aye.
Beach.
Aye.
Richardson.
Aye.
Coming back to 6B, approval of claims. Can I get a motion to approve in a second?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All right, Jackie?
Councilmember Dalby,
Aye.
Schroeder,
Aye.
Beach.
Aye.
Richardson,
Aye.
Hewlin,
Recuse.
Parker.
Aye.
All right, and then moving on to 6J, resolution approving an agreement with Des Moines Metro Planning Organization for preparing a sidewalk and trails inventory and condition report. Can I get a motion, a first and second, and then we'll have some discussion.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Okay, Brian, did you? have-
Yeah, so
Other questions?
I just kind of wanted a little more background on what the end purpose was of this sidewalk study.
Yeah, and again, I'll have AP talk about this one. This is coming from the Public Works Department, so.
So Mayor and Council, this is AP again, Public Works Director. So one of the objective is, again, this is one more asset that the city manages and owns where we do not have inventory for. So the sidewalks and trails, we have multiple locations where we do not have what we own or manage. So what's limiting is we are not able to plan and prioritize our future projects. So in order to do that, we are doing a similar conditional assessment and inventory asset management for the sidewalks like we did for our roads. Currently, we have finished our roadway inventory and condition assessments. Similarly, we are doing a similar project with this where we are going to collect all our sidewalks in GIS and their condition assessments, which will help us prioritize our future projects. It will not just give us what we own, but also prioritize and give us some capital funding projects that you can, in our future, we can plan for and see whether that's one of our objectives, whether we can grow in terms of trails or sidewalks. This study should report us all those things. Does that answer your question, Councilman Dalby?
Yeah, I think so. And I'm just concerned, it's $25,000 for this particular study. I'm just trying to make sure that it's a good use of taxpayers' money.
Sure. I mean, again, this was planned it was initially planned as a part of our capital improvement plan. Again, the overall study is going to be funded by Iowa State University and also by a part of our Des Moines area metropolitan organization. We are one of the first cities in Iowa to start this program using this program similar to what we did in our roadway where they go and collect the condition assessment of it. We have lots of sidewalks which is 3 feet wide and they have failed. So this is another tool for us to basically see whether the sidewalks are working or not working. It'll also give us future funding opportunities when the windows come up, federal grant money. We can use this as a tool for future funding opportunities too. So
One of the things so this is really similar, as AP mentioned, really similar to what we did on the street assessment. So we hired Snyder and Associates, and they literally walked every inch of roadway in our community. And so they put an assessment of what basically every foot of road that we have in our community, what the condition's in. And so that way we can then let's take a look and say, all right, we're going to send our crews because we just have limited number of people. We're going to go out, we're going to work on this, this, and this, and maybe not have to invest into a piece of sidewalk or pavement that's already so bad that it doesn't do any good to add a bunch of effort and time into it because it's already going to have to be torn out. And then we can assess and look, okay, these roadways are going to be the priorities. We're basically just doing the same thing for the sidewalk. And two, as he mentioned, we don't even know what all we have. as far as getting it on the map on the GIS and all that. So I think to me, it's a very wise choice of taxpayer dollars. Is that once we have that assessment, then now we have a roadmap of where we can go to spend the dollars to fix and maintain those things. Because I will tell you that as someone that uses the trails a lot, especially biking, nice trails are very important that cyclists talk about where the rough ones are. And I give kudos to the county for taking care of the Great Western Trail because everybody talked about how rough it was. So we just need to, it's one of those things where, yeah, it's a lot of money to do a study, but with that data that we have, I think it's very prudent to spend the money on that. I mean, in my opinion, but like I said,
And to add to that, we're able to prioritize with it, but then on top of it, you can help plan your preventative maintenance. So down the road, we don't deal with, okay, this is beyond repair now. We can be in front of some of those things and get out of this space where we're constantly playing catch up. Hopefully we can get to a point where we know in advance what we're up against instead of finding out when it's too late.
Will this study include areas that don't currently have sidewalks?
Yes.
So yeah, yes, part of the study will give you a gap analysis and also help us plan for connectivity of sidewalks in the future.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm done.
I was going to say really quick from staff standpoint, I mean, we've talked about this internally when we come to CIP planning and how we're going to be recommending projects to council that move forward. So one of the things I think this helps with is gives us just, Councilman Parker mentioned it, another tool in our toolbox where we can say, okay, we know the road's bad here. We know the sidewalk's bad. When we get the information that we need from IMU, we could say water mains, we know some of our sewer conditions. So we can kind of then prioritize, rank those areas. And then where we see, okay, this road is got some of the worst conditions between road, sidewalk, sewer, and water. We know that this should be one of our priority areas moving forward. So it really does help us in CIP planning as we evolve on building those 5 to 10 year CIPs for council.
Thank you.
Jackie?
Councilmember Parker,
aye.
Dalby,
No,
Schroeder,
Aye.
Beach,
Aye.
Richardson,
All right.
Hewlin.
Aye.
Move in to council report, and item A is review of the sustainability committee comments on the Municipal Energy Agency of Nebraska 2022 Integrated Resource Plan. That's a mouthful to get through there.
Good evening. My name is Anita Christensen. I am a member of your Indianola Sustainability Committee. I may rely on Al Ferris to help me. Another member was supposed to be here, but I'm not.
He is, he's in the other room.
Oh, is he?
Bill?
Yes, Bill, yeah.
He's on the other room. I think he's coming back.
Okay, perfect. I'll go ahead and start. So the committee is concerned about the burning of fossil fuels and the effect it has on climate. And as you all know, IMU has a long-term contract with MEAN, which for those who don't know is the Municipal Energy Agency of Nebraska. MEAN is required to create an integrated resource plan every 5 years. And that is a process for future new energy resources that evaluates the full range of alternatives, including new generating capacity, power purchases, energy conservation and efficiency, cogeneration and heating and cooling applications, and renewable energy resources to provide adequate and reliable service to a utility's electric customers. The reason we are here tonight is that the draft report came out on April 20th, and comments are only accepted until May 14th. So since we have little time to make our comments, it would be beneficial to have your approval today of us submitting these comments. So I'll read for you now the comment that we would like to give on this resource plan. In our review of the draft 2022 Integrated Resource Plan, we find your continued reliance on fossil fuel generation for the majority of your energy supply extremely disappointing. We find it unbelievable that you are still planning for 50% of your generation in 2038 to be from coal. The recently released report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change says that fossil fuel emissions need to be reduced by 45% by the year 2030. Your draft of the Integrated Resource Plan for 2022 only reduces emissions by 5% in 2029 and increases or remains the same in 2038. You need to greatly accelerate your investment in renewable energy sources. This report shows that you are not making progress towards the elimination of fossil fuels. Mid-American Energy is far ahead of you in this process. In 2021, they delivered 88% of electricity usage with renewable energy. So it is certainly feasible to decrease our reliance on coal. The good news for renewable energy sources is that once the investment is made, the fuel is free. When surveyed, members of MEAN chose low cost as the most important consideration. In the draft report, it states that the levelized cost of energy in dollars per megawatt hours is $83 for coal, $67 using community solar, and $45 using solar with storage capacity. When we look at fuel cost, the cost for using coal is $30.32 per megawatt hour and $0 for wind and solar. We encourage you to review this plan and reduce the reliance on fossil fuels and move into the future with a greater percentage of renewable energy sources.
Is there any questions for Anita or Al, or if it's Bill, correct? Any questions for them on this?
The only question I would have is, IMU aware of the communication?
No, I think we probably have to address them as well.
That would be my.
And when you look at the cost for wind, are you factoring in the cost for the turbines and the payments to the landowners and all of that?
Do you know? Phil?
I didn't hear the question.
Oh, when you look at the cost for wind, are you factoring in the cost of the turbines and the payments to the landowners?
In what respect? As
As far as the cost of the wind
levelized cost, that's all included in that levelized cost.
in the levelized cost, but when in the last paragraph or second to last paragraph, when you say 0 for wind and solar,
That's fuel cost.
So once everything's already set up and you're supplying the fuel to keep those things going, it's $0 for wind and solar.
but it's a huge cost upfront.
And we
And
do
that's-
say once the investment is made.
Right, right, I noticed that.
I might add that on coal production, the EPA estimates that there's a 5 cents per kilowatt cost to society from health and environmental impacts. So it's almost double what the production cost is.
I may be a little bit in the minority here. I'm not a big proponent of wind energy, just because of the resources it takes to generate those windmills. Those windmills are roughly 1,600 tons. I believe 270 tons is steel. It takes 170 tons of coking coal to melt that steel. It takes 1,300 tons of concrete for each windmill. So the amount of energy it takes to create that one windmill will never generate that much energy that it took to create that windmill. So I know I may be in the minority here, but that's
Yeah,
just how
I
I
can-
feel on wind energy.
I have concerns about that too, because then on top of it, the payment to the landowner. Like, so that's a
Sure.
I
30-year
think that's
contract.
including the levelized cost though, what you're saying.
Meaning what? I'm sorry.
That environmental impact that you're speaking of, wind, that's included in, the cost of making that steel and everything, that's included in that levelized cost.
So would you like to come, just so the people watching at home can hear you up by the microphone? I'm sorry. I know we can hear you, but sometimes I forget people at
Bill
home.
Howard is my name, by
Thanks,
the way.
Bill.
So, yeah, I would think that wind cost, that levelized cost includes what you're talking about, Ron.
When's the comments due?
May 14th.
So would you guys be prepared to talk to IMU on the 9th? That would be next Monday. I think we
We've
would-
kind of already talked to IMU.
Okay.
We've talked to manager Chris.
I'd like to
So,
see what their board thinks about it as well
Yeah.
too.
I think they are in favor of it, but we'd be glad to go to their meeting.
And I'm sorry, I think I missed the levelized costs. I mean, it's almost $1 million to landowners over 30 years
As far as
For
the
wind.
payment,
for wind, yeah.
yeah.
So, I mean, it's pretty large cost. So I guess I'm just curious about that. Pardon me.
Well, you also have, to when you consider that cost, you ought to consider what it costs to build a coal-fired power plant. They don't come free either.
Yeah,
That's what the levelized cost does, is it takes into account all of those factors over the life of the project and then draws the comparison.
right.
And one reason we focused on that is because in this study is 213 pages long with several appendices. It's not an easy read, but one reason we focused in on that is in phase one of the plan, they surveyed the 60 some odd members of Mean, and their first concern was low cost. And what we're trying to point out is by their own information, there are lower cost alternatives than continuing with coal-fired power plants.
Yeah,
But they
and
already
that's what
have
I'm
the
saying.
coal-fired power plants, though. They've already got those in production.
Yeah, but it's cheap. There's been studies that it's cheaper to get rid of those. They've done, Mid-Americans had a study that they can shut down all 5 of their power plants and save the ratepayers $1.2 billion.
With how many federal grants are they getting though, too? I mean, there's
Well,
kickbacks
that's
on that. offsets
for
and-
wind you're talking about,
Right,
John.
right,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I mean, you'd be silly not to take advantage of what's available there as far as
Those-
investment.
Yeah, but those are our tax dollars that they're giving out like that. So, I mean,
Well, we're not gonna change the federal law sitting here tonight.
right, no, I understand that. I'm hoping that gets done in the next few years, but anyway. I just have a different focus and a different vision, I guess, so.
And one thing about going to IMU is the sustainability committee is your committee, not IMU's.
Absolutely. I
It's
agree
the
with that,
city's
yes.
committee.
Yeah.
But they are our experts in regard to.
They're our energy people and they're
Yeah,
the ones
so-
that put us into.
They're the
meetings, you know?
I say when I mentioned that, I was just because of, they're the entity that takes care of it.
We
And
take
then,
a lot of guidance from them in response to this. And so I would love if you could present that on May 9th and see what their feedback would be. And I think it's possible that if they're okay with this, we can still have your comments submitted.
I was gonna say, why don't we, I don't know where we are, I kind of all over the board here. I know IMU is working on a solar project as well, if I'm not mistaken, right now, south of the
Should
water
have
plant.
a
Right,
PPA this
Right.
week, probably.
but I would make a motion to approve the sustainability report with the caveat that it has to be also approved by IMU.
Actually, we have no action item.
No, there's not an action.
No actionable item.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess that's where I'm standing, so.
no, but to add to that, also on that communication piece, and I could be wrong, but I know historically, IMU has also had their challenges with Mean. It's a pricey utility, number one, and that we've known historically they need to diversify their resources. So I think they may be able to add or contribute to the conversation and maybe add some stuff too that would help.
Well, it's
That's
kind of
my
like
thought.
Steve said, hopefully within the next week, we're gonna have 5% local production from solar fields here. IMU
Yeah.
purchasing that, so. But I mean, I don't think anybody sitting there, I hope not, thinks coal production is a great way of making power.
It's a dependable way of making power.
They can use it for a base load. I don't argue that point.
You know,
But they can put enough renewables online and use a coal for a 20% production for a base load. They don't have to have this 51% in 30 years from now, Ron.
my concern is our government, federal government is pushing towards everything electric. Our electric grid cannot handle, first of all, that load. Everyone comes in, plugs in their 75 amp car. And to me, green energy is not dependable energy. I mean, look what happened in Texas, 2 winters ago when
That wasn't green energy. There's been study after study that says it wasn't green energy. The gas plants what went down in Texas. Green energy only produced 10% of Texas power, but
I was
the
there.
gas plants froze up and
I
failed.
was there. Yeah, I was there.
Yeah,
during the shutdown.
It was-
And the media at that time said it was the turbines, but you know, that
Well,
could be a follow-up that you're aware
there's
of.
a little
but I'm not.
politics involved in
I'm
that
sure
statement,
there is.
okay?
Yeah, I'm sure.
But there's been studies since then that says renewable energy wasn't responsible for that.
And they have
Failure.
changed their turbines down there so that. they
Yeah,
can handle
exactly.
cold weather.
Yeah, Iowa doesn't have that problem
No.
with theirs.
One question, if you want us to go to IMU, we can certainly do that. What if they don't like this? Where's that leave us?
I think that's an inherent risk that could happen.
So is IMU running the city sustainability?
No, they are not. We're just looking for their guidance and feedback. Ultimately, it would fall on us to approve that. But again, they are our energy experts. I
They
don't
didn't
ever
give you
claim
much
to
of a
be an
training.
expert on it. This is a lot. It's a very high level.
Oh, yeah, it's a deep dive when you dig into those 213 pages. It's not easy stuff, I can tell you that. The problem is, we don't have time to come back to because of the 30-day comment period.
They didn't give you much of a time.
Right.
Yeah, and I-
Really.
Sure.
I was
It
gonna
didn't
say,
really, wasn't published until the 20th of April.
and when we talked about this from staff level and how we kind of engage the council on this, I think the Indianola Sustainability Committee is going to be the committee that submits these comments, not the city of Indianola authored by the Sustainability Committee. I think it's going to be on behalf of the Sustainability Committee. Obviously, that is your committee, but I think from the standpoint, it's just more of a get feedback from council. And if this committee wants to submit those on behalf of that committee, I think, and I look to legal, I guess, a little bit, but I do think they have the ability to do that.
Any other thoughts?
But I think from maybe the Sustainability Committee standpoint is maybe just add some of the comments, presented to council on this day, and hear some of the feedback that we got on that.
This is new ground, I think, for all of us.
Yeah.
It is.
Absolutely.
And I think one of the things too, folks, and you all folks know, Al, I've worked with you state legislature through DNR, but we don't want it, we're trying to develop a relationship with IMU, so we're not stepping on their toes and dictating to them what's going on too, in my opinion. And so from that perspective, I guess I'm okay with your study. I think it makes some sense. I would like to see us move to something that doesn't require fossil fuels as much, or nuclear, or whatever is being generated right now out there. I do think Ron's got some points about wind energy though, and I understand that. I prefer us to move more to solar, but that's another story too, so. But that's my opinion, and I'm okay if you folks decide to take that on, but I would also like IMU's input.
I agree with that. We're trying to be better partners working together. And again, ultimately, yes, it is your report to. but
Well, I
the-
think IMU is well aware of that, and I think they want to work with you people too.
Yeah, and I think
Because
that's what we're all
I've attended
working.
about all their
towards.
board meetings in the last 2 months,
Yeah.
so, yeah.
And so if maybe we could get you first thing on the agenda on Monday, you can just run it by them and again, take their feedback as well too and add it in your report. I think that, and include some of the topics we discussed. Maybe that's a happy medium, somewhere in the middle.
I would be open.
If you're okay with that, as we felt uncomfortable just putting out our comments since we are an official committee of the city, and some people thinking that therefore it was city approved.
Sure.
Right, and I appreciate that,
That's
Yeah,
the reason
yeah.
we're here.
because
Yeah.
there is a difference of opinions on things like this.
Yeah.
you know? I mean,
Oh, yeah.
there can- I mean, it's political, it's, like you say, dependable versus not dependable. How much do we use to produce the, wind energy stored, things like, there's so many opinions.
I think, from my personal viewpoint, I think we're all aware that we need this coal for a base load, et cetera.
A
But,
balance.
but this is looking 30 years down the road. And we're looking at more coal production 30 years from now than we are currently in this plan. And that's just not feasible to me.
Yeah, and I appreciate your perspective. I think, there's so many differences of opinions.
We will go to IMU.
And I agree with the mayor, and I don't know, and I think Christina said she agreed as well, was and I don't know about the rest of you, and I guess you'll have to speak up, but, you know, and what Charlie said about you're the sustainability committee of Indianola, it's not necessarily the city of Indianola position, sustainability committee. But I think you do need to have IMU input and then put those things that you heard in your report as well, the things that are some concerns, kind of move forward from there, but that's my thinking.
So I guess at this point, we go to IMU and you're approving us submitting it with after our discussion of IMU with IMU.
I actually have one more thing to say. You said we find it unbelievable. You might want to tone that down a bit. I don't know. I think they're doing a great service to our community, and they're providing a very dependable energy source. And you know, to me, it sounds like you're calling them out. And
Well, we kind of are in a way, 30 years down the line, we kind of are, Ron.
hopefully, I'm not sitting here in 30 years either. But
You don't know that. I guarantee
that.
I won't be standing here in 30 years.
after my comments tonight, I'll probably be a one-term councilman.
It's not gonna affect me in 30 years, so. If it does, I'll make a point of being back here.
We would welcome that.
I think Ron has a valid point. Maybe soften the tone of it a little bit. I think that the points are worth considering. But
Yeah,
it needs to soften the tone a little bit.
And we appreciate all the hard work you've done on this. And again, yes, it's coming from the sustainability committee, so we certainly respect your opinion. I am sure, I guarantee Al Ferris has read all 216 pages of that report, just,
Yeah, it's really,
I bet all three of you have.
I've read a lot better novels.
So we appreciate your time in that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
All right, we will move on to item 7B, Municipal Leadership Academy update from Council Member Hewlin.
Yes, thank you. I attended the League of Cities Municipal Leadership Academy. It's their part 3, specifically on the topics of economic development, community betterment, and acting strategically. Really, really loved it. I highly encourage anybody to attend. Number 1, League of Cities. All of their workshops are so helpful. And I won't go through the whole packet because it was a 4-hour session, but I did attend virtually and just kind of have the packet in front of me and wanted to highlight the reasons for community betterment. And it really kind of spoke to me because I do believe this should guide our work. And so I like the fact that they lifted this up, and it was the first slide on the presentation as far as community betterment goes. And it was talking about first impression, local pride, economic development advantage, health and public safety, enhance and retain property values, and quality of life for residents. And I think those are things that we should all be looking at and focusing on. They also mentioned approaches to community betterment with community projects, city facilities, infrastructure, regulating authority, nuisance abatement, all those things that we know that are important, but I think sometimes we get hung up on some of the other things. And so I would recommend, I would be happy to forward the packet on to everybody because I can just forward all the information. I think you guys would really enjoy it. I found it really, really valuable. Thank you for the city for sending me to it because I think it makes me a better council person, but I'll forward those things on and encourage everybody to take time to look at it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Heather. Moving on to the mayor's report, community update. Couple congratulations. I don't know if Anita is still here, but Anita's son, Kale Christensen, scored a perfect score on the ACTs at 36. So
Awesome.
as a junior, and he did tell me also he didn't study. So congratulations to Kale Christensen. Another congratulations to Walker Whalen. He threw discus at the Drake Relays this past week and won that. He came home a champion with the 12th furthest throw ever in Iowa history. So we've got a lot of good things happening here. I attended a school presentation along with Ron and Gwen last week on the new high school and really appreciated the creative way they've kind of looked at things. And, we'll continue to see what they decide to do as they move forward, if they're going to do a referendum this fall or spring. Also, we had a neighborhood meeting with Deer Run neighbors. And I don't know, Gwen, if you want to give any on that as your ward, but it was very well attended, and I think we're very excited about this summer, and I encourage everybody to golf if you can.
It was a great meeting.
It was.
Memberships are soon available. They're limiting to 50. The costs are on the website, but they don't quite have it ready. They're working on the greens or the grounds rather, really working on it. So I think it's going to be a really positive improvement for the city.
Absolutely, and their website is deerrunclub.com for anyone that wants to look at it. And I want to thank the neighbors as well on the course and people who reside around there. They have really stepped up, offering monetary to keep things going and to help the new owners. So they are really excited about the welcome they've had. And lastly, we have coming up on June 10th, I believe it's the 10th, we have the Mayor's Bike Fest, and the Mayor's Youth Council will be putting that on. So that's always exciting. Free helmets for children in the community, as well as some bikes we'll give away. We have a dunk tank, and I'll be following up with all of you this week to see if you can attend. And if you want to sit in the dunk tank, you raise money for the Mayor's Youth Council. So at this point after the meeting tonight, some of us might make more money than others. I really want to dunk us. So I think it's a great event for the community. We'll be at Irving in the parking lot, and lots of water activities. So it'll be fun. And that is all I have. We will move on to number 9, public consideration, old business. Number 1 is, Jackie, I lost my sheet where you had me at. We'll move into, need a motion. Jackie.
Yeah, with public hearing.
91A.
Yep, that's what it is. 9A. Thanks. Jackie keeps us all in line here. I need a first and a second motion on a resolution approving a development agreement and the sale of real estate property located at 506.
Gotta have a public hearing first.
Okay, all of that.
Move to go into public hearing regarding development agreement, sale of real property located at 506 West Second Avenue.
Thanks, Sean. Second. Thank you. Okay, now, is there anyone here who would like to
I need
speak?
to do a roll call. Councilmember Dalby? You're doing so, Schroeder?
Aye.
Beach?
Aye.
Richardson?
Aye.
Hewland?
Aye.
Parker?
Aye.
We were doing really well there in our agenda. We were moving right along. Is there anyone who would like to speak on this? If not, I'll turn it over to Charlie. If there is someone that wants to speak in the other room, you can speak after Charlie goes as well too.
Perfect. Well, I'll start. So this is the 506 West Second Avenue. I'm sure most of council is familiar with the dangerous and dilapidated building program. This is the last property that we have available in this program, and it is outlined in red. And I'm sorry, those colors might be a little bit hard to see up there, but this lot right here is ours. And then these two right here next door are also vacant. They are not owned by the city, but they are ultimately a part of what is being proposed with this development. So really quick, what's going to show you rendering. This is included in the development agreement that you have, but what the purchaser is proposing here is a set of townhomes, 4-row units that will be constructed, each with a 1-car garage. We've looked at the plan that they have that shows the dimensions and setbacks and all that stuff, and it actually fits pretty perfectly within the confines of what is available. So the concept that they do have here will actually work. So really quick, just kind of wanted to go over a few things. The main thing that we want to let council know is that there is a policy regarding the dangerous and dilapidated program. And what it says is that all purchases of property from the city shall include a development agreement, which is proposed here this evening, outlining a minimum of 10 years net return on investment when considering city, county, and school tax revenue. So essentially what that says is whatever the city has invested into this property, we need to collect that amount back in tax revenue over a period of 10 years. So the amount that we've invested in this property is $32,125. When we look at everything, first of all, the purchaser is proposing a $500,000 project, which would include the 4 rental units. So we've looked at it a few things. First of all, since we are putting 4 buildings on these 3 lots here, and the city really only owns a third of that, we kind of had to look at how the value goes back into the 1 lot that we own. So if we considered with tax abatement, and that's the sliding tax abatement, so 100-year or 100% tax abatement on the first year, 82nd, and down the row. With tax abatement, the city would have to recoup or have a valuation of $214,225 on the city lot, and that equates to about $642,675 for the entire project. So a little bit over what they're proposing with their project. However, if we get into an agreement with them that states that they cannot use tax abatement, that amount goes down to $149,955 on the city lot, or about $450,000 for the entire project. So with that, we are proposing in the development agreement a minimum valuation and a minimum assessment agreement at that $449,865, and not allowing tax abatement to be used with it. So that then meets the intent of the council policy. So with that, I think that's everything I had to present, but happy to answer any questions if council has them.
Is that plan a slab?
Initially it was, but kind of as we've been discussing this with the real estate agent, they said that they are looking at basements as a possibility on this.
I was gonna say, I think when they presented it too, they had in there the crawl spaces
Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
for this.
Yeah. Yeah, no, just it was one email communication I had. They asked if we would allow for it, and I said, yes, definitely. Which then again would increase that value. So
And that tax abatement will only be on the city property. Will they have it on the private home?
no, it was with all of them
With
that
all
they
of
wouldn't be
them,
able to
okay.
use it. Yep. And that's just to get us to meet that policy.
And
that
are
we have
they,
to make that
like, we communicated that?
Yeah, they've already signed the development agreement on their
Okay,
plan.
perfect. Any other questions?
Is there anybody to speak on the issue?
I don't
Think so?
know. All right. Can I get a first and second motion on a resolution approving?
No,
I make a motion to go out of close or go out of public hearing.
Thank you,
Second.
Jackie.
Councilmember Dalby,
Aye.
Schroeder,
Aye.
Beach,
Aye.
Richardson,
Aye.
Hewlin,
Aye.
Parker.
Aye.
Okay, now, for the third time, we need a first and second motion on a resolution approving a development agreement in the sale of real estate property located at 506 West Second Avenue.
So moved as read.
Thank you. Any other discussion?
Who seconded it?
Wendy was here.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
And roll call.
Councilmember Hewlin,
Aye.
Parker,
Aye.
Dalby,
Aye.
Schroeder,
Aye.
Beach,
Aye.
Richardson.
Aye.
Okay, we will move on to 9H C, which is, I need a first and second motion on a resolution authorizing payment to select settlement services in an amount not to exceed $3,000 for closing costs related to the sale of real estate property located at 506 West Second Avenue.
So moved as read.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion?
Just if anybody's wondering, we would normally do this through a claim, but when you're going through closing, obviously you don't know what that final settlement statement is until the very end. Right now, the preliminary settlement statement that we have is for $2,863. We're pretty confident it's going to be at that amount, but we just wanted to give ourselves a little bit of leniency on that. So.
Any other questions? Jackie?
Councilmember Parker,
Aye.
Dalby,
Aye.
Schroeder.
Aye.
Beach,
Aye.
Richardson.
Aye.
Hewlin.
Aye.
All right, 9A2A. I need a first and second motion to open the public hearing for Jiffy 921 regarding the mandatory $300 civil penalty prescribed by 453A.22.2A for the violation of Iowa Code Section 453A.2.1, selling, giving, or otherwise supplying any tobacco products, or cigarettes to any person under the age of 21 years of age.
So moved as read.
Thank you.
Second.
Jackie?
Councilmember Beach.
Aye.
Richardson.
Aye.
Hewlin.
Aye.
Parker.
Aye.
Dalby,
Aye.
Schroeder.
Aye.
We are now in the public hearing. Is there anyone who would like to speak on this matter? So,
Motion to close the public
thank
hearing.
you.
Second.
All right. So I need a first and second motion
We
to,
already just did.
thanks. Oh, no,
gotta vote.
Jackie, vote. We'll close it and then we'll come back and vote on it.
Councilmember Hewlin,
Technicality.
Aye.
Parker,
Aye.
Dalby,
Aye.
Schroeder.
Aye.
Beach,
Aye.
Richardson.
Aye.
Now I need a first and second motion to assess a civil penalty in the amount of $300 against Jiffy store number 921, 311 North Jefferson, the retail permit holder. First and second.
So moved as read.
Second.
Thank you. Any more discussion? All right, Jack.
Councilmember Dalby,
Aye.
Schroeder,
Aye.
Beach,
Aye.
Richardson,
Aye.
Hewlin,
Aye.
Parker.
Aye.
We will move on to item 9.3 is the fiscal year 22 budget amendment. So I need a first and second to open the public hearing on a third budget amendment to FY 22 budget. Jackie.
Motion as read.
Thank you.
Second.
Now, Jackie.
Councilmember Dalby,
Aye.
Schroeder.
Aye.
Beach,
Aye.
Richardson,
Aye.
Hewlin,
Aye.
Parker.
Aye.
Mayor, members of council, this is the third and final amendment to the fiscal year 22 budget amendment, or budget. The notice for the hearing was published in the Indiana Record Herald on 13 April 2022. You see the reasons there. Mainly, the main reason for this amendment is to account for the higher than budgeted amount that we received in local option sales tax, and then to schedule the payment in debt service for the payment this year for the third and final SRF loan. Well, the third loan for the SRF for the Water Resource Recovery Facility. It is the final loan that we are taking out for the facility, not the final payment. So that payment is coming out of dates that service instead of the sewer sinking fund, because it is a GO bond. It's a general obligation bond. It is being paid by local option sales tax, not by property tax. This is not an increase in property tax. It is being paid by local option sales tax. But because it's general obligation, it has to come out of Fund 200.
So what is the, what's been our local option sales tax revenues to date, Andy? Do you know that?
Each year, it's been close to 2 million.
Okay. And have we seen increases? When was this from what date to what date is this 882,046? You remember?
I couldn't say. We were normally budgeting about $1 million a year. For FY22, we budgeted 1.5 million. At the beginning of the year, we get an estimate. We got an estimate of about 1.9 million.
Okay.
Because they give us how much they're going to pay us each month.
Right.
And then in November, they give a reconciliation payment for the previous year. If they underpaid the city, they give us an amount, and this year's amount was about 350,000.
Okay.
Roughly.
So
I can't say what month it was.
right. Well,
or
okay.
anything like that.
Yeah, I know. You covered what I was asking, so I appreciate that. Okay. And so my understanding is then we're actually going to have a net. There's no cost of budget, but we're going to have a surplus of 93,488. Then is that what we're looking at? Okay. In that particular fund.
Well, and that's the ending fund budget, ending fund balance for the whole the entire city.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Get a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Jackie.
Councilmember Dalby,
Aye.
Schroeder,
Aye.
Beach,
Aye.
Richardson,
Aye.
Hewlin,
Aye.
Parker.
Aye.
And now I need a first and second motion on a resolution approving the third budget amendment for the fiscal year 22 budget.
So moved as read.
Second.
Any more discussion? Jackie.
Councilmember Hewlin,
Aye.
Parker,
Aye.
Dalby,
Aye.
Schroeder,
Aye.
Beach,
Aye.
Richardson.
Aye.
All right, we will now move on to 9.4 is our building project. We'll begin with a presentation by Michael Maloney from DA Davidson regarding the public safety and library city hall buildings. I know a lot of you are anxious and you're here for that. I will welcome your comments and we will listen to you. We'll let Mike give his presentation and then we will open the floor a little bit for some discussion.
Perfect. Ms. Mayor and council, good to see everybody again. I know we have this up on the screen here. You're getting hard copies of the entire presentation. And for the council's ability and easy use, there's a couple items that are in slides that have a whole sheet just so you can see the numbers in more detail.
Thank you.
For your context before today, 90% of the content I'm going to cover, council should be aware of already. So I want to spend 10% of the time on that overview. And I want to spend 90% of the time covering the new 10% of detail for your future action tonight, as well as answering any questions that you may have. So I'm not going to gloss over anything. I want to hit the high points. I also want to encourage the mayor and council to jump in as we go through to answer any questions along the way as well. So where are we going to start today? I think the message to council has been consistent previously, and this is echoed for any other city government looking at doing capital projects around the state. The three big picture items are about authority, capacity, and repayment. Authority really is about the ability to issue any related debt to capital projects. I've noted that public hearings are a typical way. For public buildings like what we're talking about, typically that needs to be done through a referendum. And that's what we're going to be outlining today. That's the future action. That's the piece that's on the agenda today. The other items, while they have interplay with that process, will be addressed at a future time. So we put projections together as it relates to capacity of outstanding debt and projected debt, as well as repayment of such debt. We try to be conservative with those estimates, and we'll outline that here a bit today. I want to be clear, this has been a multi-year planning process. I know that was outlined in greater detail by the consultant and architect group at the last council meeting, but the multi-year planning historically doesn't end with any action today or even a referendum. That merely gives the authority to proceed with future financing. That's when the hard work gets done in terms of further details with specific projects, borrowing considerations, et cetera. Timing matters, as we all know, especially in this age of inflation here we're going through. So I want to keep that in mind as we think about the decision process. Overall, this needs to fit with the long-term strategic plan, and not just the council members and the taxpayers, but the community writ large. So what about how to pay for this and funding sources? We've got an outline of all the funding sources of the city. The bolded items are the two items that we've tapped as potential repayment sources for the project, specific to the financing. I want to be clear, there could be other sources of funds available for this project, whether city funds or external funds. We're not outlining that today. That would obviously reduce any potential burden on the city. That's typically something addressed along with the capital plan down the road as part of a referendum or an ultimate building project. The two items here are the debt service levy component of the city's overall property tax rate, okay? And that's where we're gonna have an impact analysis we'll talk a little bit about later. The other portion would come from a voted levy or a voted revenue stream, and that's the sales tax we just talked about with the budget amendment with Andy. That can be used for portion repayment of the public safety facility. That's what the referendum language from a few years ago covered. We've been conservative there, estimating only about $250,000 would go towards that purpose. That's what's included. That's a decision for the future council to make. It's just a placeholder for today's discussion. Okay. So what does that look like for capital funding sources over the next 25-year term? I'll make a point here. Yeah, I get it. The numbers guy, not gonna be a lot of graphics. They're not gonna be very good. This pie chart is going to be reiterated later in the presentation with a different funding mix. It's also a bigger pie, so keep that in mind. This right now would be considered more of a status quo. And by status quo, I mean no increases in some of the external revenue streams like road use taxes and sales taxes. And the debt service levy component of the city's overall property tax rate is unchanged at $1.40, hence the title on the slide here. For a little context on that debt service levy component, city government, schools, other taxing districts all have different rules. For a city government, that debt service levy is unlimited. That's the council's decision to set as part of the budget each year. For school districts, there's different limitations. So for Indianola schools, for example, it's a 405 limit. They've historically had their debt levy component of their overall property tax rate at that 405 limit. And I'd expect in their planning, they keep it there on the go forward. So just a little context for some apples and oranges there for you today. So the capital plan initiative, obviously at the dollar amounts we're talking about here and also.
Mike, I gotta ask you a question.
Yep.
I got that last slide. So give me the parameters by which this slide was put together. There's no increase in local option sales tax revenue.
Correct. Yep.
Okay, which isn't realistic though.
It's not realistic in terms of the total slice of the pie. I think we're all a little, we want to be in consideration of what that might look like. We've isolated that at about $1.6 million a year, which is a place where I think staff feels comfortable. You don't control the sales tax revenue stream. And while we've had a couple very good years, I think there is a question in terms of what that looks like over the long term. And furthermore, with the state legislature looking to potentially get more involved with that revenue stream, I think it's reasonable to keep that relatively modest. Furthermore, regardless if we increase that for this slide or not, I think it's important to note we've only articulated about $250,000 of that would be going to this purpose.
Right.
Any growth would be for other needs of the city, likely pay-as-you-go or operating type costs that are eligible.
Right.
So again, with the size of the projects here, I think the point is that the folks utilizing the project over the long term should share in the repayment of that cost. Not only is it unrealistic that we necessarily have those dollars today to be able to pay for this project, financing is needed to spread the impact of those costs over time. I think we're clear on that, but we want to make sure we're implementing rates and charges appropriate for different types of capital needs of the city. This is what we're trying to do here. Despite these being long-term investments, long capital projects that are going to last for a long time, the state also limits us on the type of financing we're doing to a 20-year term. So you can't borrow for more than 20 years for these purposes, even if you wanted to. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about capacity. The state of Iowa and any taxing jurisdiction is limited to 5% of GO bonds, no more than 5% of your assessed valuation. That's the actual valuation of the city. Now that's a snapshot at any given time. As we know, the tax assessments change annually. Typically, we know those are going up in a growing community, which means you'd have more capacity. Plus, you're paying down existing debt each year. It's not a credit card that's accruing interest. You're paying down the debt annually. So between those two things, with no additional debt earned, more capacity will be available in the future. And we'll show that on a following slide. Right now, for the fiscal year we're entering, the budget year 23, the debt limit for the city is about 57 million. We're using about 33 million of that. So the remaining is about $24 million. That's for traditional GO debt. You can create additional leverage, as we've discussed, with something called annual appropriation debt, where only the next year's budget payment counts against this limit. That is the way to get access to these additional funds, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. This is the shape of the debt. I've noted previously to council that debt was reduced significantly between 2015 and 2020. We did some near-term borrowing, both for refinancing purposes and some street and streetscape improvements over the last couple of years. We also did about 50% of the GO debt that the city has right now outstanding is related to the WRF. That's the portion Andy mentioned for your budget amendment that we're using sales taxes to repay. Because we're using sales taxes, those are issued as GO bonds. They count against our capacity limit, though they're not impacting our property tax rate. Want to be clear on that. I also, from the shape of this chart, wanted to be clear that debt is being repaid annually. So that's why we see the slope down over time as we go along. This will be followed up with what would this look like, assuming additional debt in the future.
Michael, and really quick, I just want to clarify, and I know council knows this, but for the audience, when we say work, we're talking wastewater treatment facility. and plant.
Thank you, Charlie. So financing considerations here. I talked a little bit about the annual appropriation consideration. Again, that's a way to create additional leverage for borrowing. The city has a particularly high credit rating. So all things being equal with where interest rates are, and we know they've climbed recently, your cost of borrowing between traditional and annual appropriation debt should be relatively modest. So you can have the capacity here to do all the projects. It's just a matter of repayment, which I think is the key we want to focus on today. While they're not necessarily typical in Iowa, annual appropriation is growing as something people need to use because the growing cost for projects, and is pretty typical outside of the state. So it's something that we regularly do and understand well, though it may be a new concept for the city today. So back to the reason for the potential to put a ballot initiative together is because the state has limited what the so-called general corporate purpose projects, like public buildings, based on non-indexed dollar amounts from the 80s. So a $700,000 limit doesn't get you particularly far beyond some basic repairs of existing public facilities. We can't group those in a super clever way to add it up to a bigger number either. So we need to be thoughtful about how we could have authority to issue more debt. The real only access here for the city of Indianola is the bond referendum. We talked about the debt service levy a little bit. So a small portion repaid by sales taxes. The balance for our initial analysis of any borrowing would be coming from the debt service levy component of the city's overall property tax rate. And just for instance, while we've had $1.40 as the debt levy rate of the city here recently, just $1 of debt gets you about $686,000 a year based on current taxable valuations. That's about 13.7 million over the next 20 years. So just a context for what that piece buys you over time. We've talked about 20 to 25 years, depending on the staggering of projects, that will have an impact as well. So just $1 impact in addition would be an additional $13.7 million to service debt. I'm not going to dwell on the sales tax pieces. Just as a refresher here, about $1.5 to $1.8 million is sort of the sales tax revenue expectation. And again, Councilmember Richardson, to your point, I think we see some upside there, but we also have uncertainty with that. So just plugging that number in on the high end over the next 20 years, maybe $36 million available from that stream. $1 million a year is allocated to the WRF project, the sewer treatment plant of the city that's being completed now through 2041. So while the council would have the ability to use some of those dollars for other purposes, that $1 million is currently spoken for. Okay. While we can use sales tax dollars for the public safety facility element, and we could, in theory, gain authority to borrow for that project without a referendum, it doesn't solve any of our problems from a capacity standpoint or a further repayment standpoint. The city has the same flexibility regardless. So rather than trying to go through a hearing process with that, the concept on the agenda today would be to put that project out to a ballot initiative as well. I wanted to show the work here and say that there's not some magic answer for cities on the sales tax side where we could avoid some of those capacity considerations. This is opposite from maybe what a school district would do, for instance. The school district sales tax revenue stream is a different stream. That penny tax that they receive, they can borrow off of that without having to go to a vote. It's only the property tax back pieces. So just a little bit apples and oranges on that city school I want to make sure you and the public were aware of today. So we talked about the potential repayment sources already. I think we've covered that. I'm just anchoring here before we get into some of the additional details. This is impact to future tax rates, potentially when debt is issued. Again, we're talking about getting authority to proceed. The final timing of this would have an impact on the ultimate results, not just in terms of the cost of the project and interest rates, but the city does not have much debt outstanding. The limited debt you do have that's paid by the debt levy is done in 2031. The closer we get to that, the more room we have to absorb future payments as well. That math needs to be considered in the what ifs we have here, hence the reason for us preparing a range of outcomes for you to understand on a conservative basis. So long-term here, the summary considerations is in today's dollars, looking at about $46.2 million of combined costs for the projects previously discussed. Again, capacity is going to be something we can address. Timing is going to be determined by the ultimate project work once bid. But I think it's really important to think about what this impact could have beyond just the tax level in terms of, hey, how much capacity does this use up for us long-term? What other funding sources are we going to use? Does it do anything for our credit rating? Well, we don't necessarily think this will have downward impact on the city's credit rating as we continue to grow. We'd rather quantify that for you now than have questions later. We do think, while it is important, and we all have pride in the city's outstanding AA2 rating, it's the third highest possible and truly the highest you have based on your tax base. There could be downward pressure of about a notch on that if you go through with the whole project. Pride's one element, the dollars are the other, maybe 0.05 to 0.15% impact in today's rates for that purpose. A few assumptions that we had here. We've assumed just a conservative 1.5% annual assessed valuation growth. And I think we all know that the city has outpaced that over the last several years, and significantly so. That being said, that's an annualized return over a 20 or 25-year period for our projections. And it makes sense to err on the conservative side of that for an impact analysis. If we have better than expected growth, you're going to have lower than expected impact. I think we all get that, but again, I want to make sure that was clear. We've ran everything as a 20-year amortization with what I'd call aggregate level debt payments. By that, what I mean is we've done some thoughtful structuring to reduce the potential impact to taxpayers. This is not just levering on debt as if we would another mortgage with level payments. We've thought about the city's shape of debt and working around that. As I mentioned before, the city just doesn't have a whole lot of debt outstanding, which means we don't have a whole lot of room to maneuver. Furthermore, we've refinanced every eligible piece of debt over the last several years, similar to what the school district has done. And with that, we have very, very low interest rates, often under 2%. So it's really about the time to move beyond that. There's just not a whole lot of existing debt burden that we're working with, but we have accounted for that in any of our structuring.
Mike, even with the rate raised by the Fed on the interest rates, are you saying that bond interest rates would still be around 2%?
No.
Okay, I'm sorry. What did you just say then?
I was talking about the structuring of debt. So I was talking about structuring it around existing debt.
Yeah, but you were talking about the bond rates.
Your existing debt is at 2% or below,
Okay.
and those are fixed rates that are not going to be affected by
Right,
going
I
forward.
understand that.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so there's
So
not
we
a
don't
lot.
know, we have no clue what the rates are going to be on these particular bonds.
Right, we've tried to be conservative, and that's the range of estimates that we've got here today.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. I misunderstood. I apologize.
Yep, no, not a problem. So overall, I talked about using $250,000 from sales tax. We talked about the growth assumptions. In terms of that range of impact, and we'll get into the detail on this, looking about between $2.35 and $3.70 per thousand of tax rate. So we have that for a couple analysis on different assessed valuation amounts for both residential and commercial. We'll get into details on, but just for an impact concept, around $20 to $32 a month for what is considered a median homeowner right now in the city of Indianola. And we'll get into that detail. Now, with that range, what are the considerations there? One, increasing project costs. Two, increasing interest rates. And three, the timing of implementation. There's both pluses and minuses. So the longer we wait, costs could go up, but we have more capacity for structuring the debt. On the other hand, if things go sooner, rates stay the same, it could be potentially a benefit there as well. So we've modeled it under a number of scenarios. And we think that's a safe range. You'll notice that 370 is a little bit higher than what was previously projected. The reason is over the last 5 or 6 weeks, interest rates have continued to jump. We want to have the same conservative cushion on rates as we look at this that we did a month or two ago as well. So under this steep incline place, we want to be clear about that being on the high end of estimates. It's a lot easier for us to be frank about that now. It would be great if we're on the lower end or better, especially if valuation growth goes in our favor over time. Want to be clear about that in the assumptions we're making today. Probably this chart would be back. Not any better, except it's got good colors. But overall, the yellow debt would be the new debt structured on and the principal repaid over time in terms of impact on capacity. As I noted,
Page 17.
Page 17.
The numbers up there. Thank you.
I think the numbers overrun from the city's presentation on the actual slide. There you go. So 17, the chart there mentioned shows that, again, we would be within our capacity limitations at the time, but debt is repaid each year over time and falling off, regaining capacity for the city over time. So those snapshots are based on each year piece, so you can see that as it evolves. The pie chart, again, bigger pie here overall. And the biggest change to this is just more use of the city's debt service levy component. So overall, from a funding mix, that's the change in the ratios. It's talking about a potential levy impact that's assumed to produce more revenues for the city to pay these debt obligations. I think that's useful context here. The pie chart's nice from a visual standpoint, but I do want to get in the details of the impact because that's the new content for you here today. So the first page with the green shading in the middle are impact on residential property owners. And I've highlighted $200,000 and $250,000 for assessed valuation. I think we've seen with the reassessment years, the valuation increases on not just existing homes, but also the new home prices. In that range, perhaps in the low end today, maybe closer to the high end of that 250 by the time these are implemented, would be the potential impact on residential properties. The top half of that page shows the impact at the low end of our impact analysis, 235 per mil, and the lower half is at 370 per mil. So with that impact, you can see on around the $200,000 median home assessment, $20 on the low end, $32 on the high end in terms of the monthly impact, 25 and 40 for the 250,000 top end of that valuation range. I'm going to go on to the commercial and then I'll pause for some questions from council. I think it's important to articulate also the commercial impact. I think the biggest difference here, while also showing some higher valuation assessments because of the types of commercial properties, you'll note the rollback percentage. In Iowa, about 55 to 60% is all you're paying taxes on. For commercial industrial entities, it's 90%. Same idea in terms of carrying that through based on the various entities. I think on the commercial piece, it's tough to peg necessarily an average or median or what have you. So illustration purposes here only. I'm going to pause for a minute before getting into the rest of the details today, but I thought this was useful.
So a commercial and an industrial property valued at $2 million would have a annual tax increase of $6,660 a year.
Correct. Yep, based on the high end estimate there.
Legislature played with that 90%. I mean, it went from 100 to 90. Have we played with that, or has it been talk of playing with that 90%?
Nothing with seriousness recently, sir. The 90% was a big move on the commercial property tax element. I think the big focus right now is on the state income tax level rather than on property tax assessments.
Yeah, I got it. Okay. Well, thanks.
We can come back to any questions on this as we continue going forward. I think the next slide is an important piece of information for folks to understand. The city's tax rate is only one component of your overall tax bill. So we talk about the city tax rate and the debt levy being a component of the city tax rate. We also need to think about what we actually pay on, which is the consolidated tax rate. So for example, here would be a city of Indianola resident that lives in Indianola School District. That's all within Warren County. You have some other overlapping districts as well, folks like DMAC, Ag Extension, Assessor, and some smaller state tax rates. I think it's important to quantify here. The city's about 1/3 of the overall property tax bill for a city resident. I think the other piece in compare and contrast between the city and the schools, I noticed the city's current tax rate has $1.40 of the debt service levy. The schools is at $4.05. So just for some context on how that works out for everybody here. I have some broader comparisons as well over the last slides before wrapping things up. But I thought this was useful to point out that it's not just the city impacting the overall property.
This is $39.58 per thousand after you roll back is what we currently pay in city of Indianola.
That's right.
And so with one of these two projects, depending on which, if we go with both or single, it would then go up anywhere from
235 to 370.
235.
I think 41 to 43 is probably the shorthand there.
I'm sorry, what was that again?
$41 to $43 per
Okay.
mil on the consolidated.
And then.
And there could be differences depending on where you live within.
Sure.
So a couple tax rate considerations, and there's no perfect analysis here. So for comparable communities, what we worked on with staff was to identify communities around the state with 10,000 in population, or 10,000 to 25,000 around the state, and then metro communities as well. And some of those cities just aren't good fit. Des Moines to Indianola is not a great comparison, and we know that, but it's included here for reference, okay? Overall, it's 34 cities, including the city of Indianola, all right? And just some by the numbers, I am gonna read these off the slide. So right now, the city is 8th lowest debt service for rate for fiscal 22 out of the 34, just being able to get the fiscal 22 rates. The fiscal 23 rates will be publicly available from the state here later this summer. City ranks 17th and lowest in total tax rate. And again, I think you need to think about tax base as well. When we get over that 10,000 population, over 15,000, there's certain different levels of services that we need to provide regardless of our scale. And a larger tax base with more taxpayers is not necessarily going to cost you more to operate. So we need to think about that impact. And when we look about most comparable in terms of rate and valuation, they're actually more rural county seat towns than metro communities. And I think that's just an important reference point for folks. They might not be experiencing the same growth as Indianola is here in the metro, but that also means they're not having the same demand for services and talent as well. Overall, I think an important statistic, just digging into the numbers, was the city has the 11th lowest taxable valuation per capita, and it's the lowest in the metro, actually. That's probably really due to the residential concentration. We know there's a sort of a bedroom community element here. We don't have the giant commercial aspect that's helped buffering things. I think you think about the data centers around the metro. or the big distribution centers, right? Folks like Grimes, right? Folks like Bondurant, folks like Altoona have just enormous commercial and industrial valuations that don't take a whole lot of services. And while they do get some tax incentives, pay a lot in, and that helps offset the debt rate. So just something to consider when we're talking apples and oranges here. The last piece is, well, what are these other communities doing? And everyone's got a different story. There's different revenue streams out there. One thing that was pointed out, city is the 10th lowest TIF percentage of their taxable valuation of the group. So at 7%. So 7% of the city's taxable value is for TIF. Most are much higher. I think an easy comparison is someone like Norwalk. Norwalk's at about 27%. That being said, I thought an interesting just comparison, just looking at numbers, was the difference between the city's tax rate and Norwalk is the 235 on the low end of the analysis in terms of levy impact as well. So just some food for thought. Again, I don't think there's a magic answer here, but this is information I think would be useful from council's perspective. I know you asked for a little bit of detail as well. More than happy to dig in further before wrapping up on some of information specific to tonight's future action.
So this is all based on fiscal year 22, based on comparables that you've used to your different cities and stuff for 23, 24, with the increase that we have to, what do you say, $41 to $43?
Yep.
Where would that then put us? Where would we be in all these comparables?
Yeah, let's look at that. I have that, kind of anticipated your question there. So let's put this together.
Maybe we've been spending too much time together.
Okay. Which one are you interested in the most? What stat? do you
Well,
feel
you're
like-
giving us all these comparables about it ranked 16th and 8th and all these things based on 22, but if these go into effect, where does that put us in relationship to any of the other cities, I guess, from my standpoint?
Yeah, so let's do this. I think the biggest place would be the overall property tax rate. Let's start with that one.
Can you give us those 34 cities? I mean,
Yeah,
I think it adds context to it all,
absolutely.
who they are.
Let's do it alphabetical. How's that?
Perfect.
Altoona, Ankeny, Bondurant, Boone, Burlington, Carlisle, Carroll, Clive, Coralville, Des Moines, Fairfield, Fort Dodge, Fort Madison, Grimes, Indianola, Johnston, Keokuk, Lamars, Muscatine, Newton, North Liberty, Norwalk, Oskaloosa, Ottumwa, Pella, Pleasant Hill, Polk City, Spencer, Storm Lake, Urbandale, Waukee, Waverly, West Des Moines, Windsor Heights. So again, it's everybody in the state between 10,000 and 25,000, plus the metro communities of any scale.
So could you go through those, then where would the city fall on the
Yep.
debt service levy?
Yep. So let's pull that up. 23 out of 32.
And that's with the 50 million.
Yes, the full amount.
And that's the debt service levy, correct? And then we'll go to the cities ranked 17th lowest in the total.
28. I did consolidated just through the metro because it's a little bit apples and oranges once we get outside of town. I think it was 16 communities there, go to 12. Now, again, you're exactly right, Councilmember Richardson, this is a snapshot on 2022. Other folks are doing things as well. Other folks is growing as well. Other folks are in different life cycles as well. So the timing of this could really impact things. That's why quantifying them with the snapshots I put in the slides for today is really the best information we've got. It would be an increase, but I would also say that, you know, of that group of 16 in the metro, there's a few that are more mature and established on the lower end. That average tends to be pretty close to your $40, $41, depending on who you're looking at for consolidated tax rate.
And Polk County is quite significantly higher than us. So
Absolutely.
I would say that's an apple and oranges. Anything that has
Absolutely.
a Polk County tax rate in it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I
But-
wouldn't even call it a comparable, honestly.
But the Polk County items are actually a lot lower too, just because they're built out. So think about a West Des Moines from 20, 25 years ago. They went in their leverage piece and they had high taxes at the time, right? Now they have the lowest tax rate in Polk County. So it's just a matter of life cycles in terms of implementation of infrastructure to fuel growth.
And
I
all-
agree. Go ahead.
And all of those communities have built city halls, built libraries, built public safety, and we've done none of them. So anyway.
And the utilization of sales tax and TIF are the biggest variables. You know, I could give you a story on all 34 of these. They're all different. They're all right for the different times of those communities. So there's not a magic answer. I think I had the best question ever posed to me at a council meeting last week. A new council member asked, is growth good or bad? And we didn't have enough time to answer that. We're not having enough time in our terms to answer that. And I think it's just one of the balancing acts that the elected officials need to do.
This is a lot of information. Look over.
And I think one thing, just before wrapping up here, because I do want to get to the meatier legal pieces, I would say that this can be refined over time. Not the last time you're going to see data like this. This is the piece that's going to be moving throughout. Sorry to interrupt. Yep.
No, I think it's fine. I think that there's a lot to look over. I'd like to take a 10-minute recess.
Sure.
I'd like to give the audience a copy of this as well too. I think it's fair that they see the numbers as well as what it's going to do to their property taxes for consideration. And then we'll come back at 7.
Are you done with your slide?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I thought you were all wrapped up. But
No, sorry. Yep. So just to finish on this and on what we're here for, and this will be quick. Again, the council action steps for financing. So determine project costs and cost estimates, understand the funding options. We've talked a little bit about capacity and we've talked a little bit about repayment. Those are going to be moving as we continue to refine things. Before we can go much further, there needs to be authority. Authority is gained through a bond referendum. That's why that's on your agenda today. What we want to do is understand what we need to have for that initiative. We've got to have a purpose language, and we've got 2 initiatives with different purpose language on there, and then a not to exceed borrowing amount. You kind of have to call your shot early in the process, and we don't want to err on the low side. We know costs are going to potentially increase. Timing is going to be fluid based on bids, supply chains, et cetera. So we'd be thoughtful. So this is just showing our work on why what's in here is in here. I think we all have a little bit of context for why we want to be conservative on that standpoint. Those are not to exceed borrowing amounts. They're not budget values. Again, inflationary concerns, I don't think are rocket science. And we hope that what's going on now will soften out in time. I think we need to rely on the experts. So the experts have worked on their specific pieces. I don't understand the level of detail that your architects and engineers and consultants do in terms of inflationary costs. They have gone through with you already. The expectation of about 4.5% per year is included in here. Could be more, could be less, but for our purposes, we use that over the long term for a multi-year consideration what project costs could be. My job is then to build from those estimated project costs what those not to exceed amounts could be in future dates. Now, we don't have the luxury like we would on a public hearing process of coming back around the same time as bids or when taking bids. To move forward, we want to understand what those could be. So we want to take those out to the most conservative extent. That developed the 2 not to exceed amounts for today's resolutions. The public safety building at 34.5 million, library municipal building at 27.7. And again, not to exceed borrowing amounts. You're not obligated to go up to those amounts or any percentage of those amounts. They're not budget amounts. It doesn't create a buffet in terms of things to do. They'll still be refined by this council in future action. So then the last point is just showing the work in terms of how we got those numbers. You've seen from the consultants and architects, the estimates for project costs in today's dollars, and then we refined those out into future years, even further than what we did in terms of the previous presentations, all the way out to 2028 construction, just to be thoughtful about this. Depending on all the variables that are out there, it makes sense to be on the high side. So we have the project costs for each of the buildings, and then the not to exceed borrow amounts done in the customary fashion. Again, those are what it would be if we were doing this in a kind of public hearing timeframe close to the actual bid process, and then extrapolating that out over the next 5 years as well. Want to be on the high side here because we wouldn't otherwise have authority to proceed with the projects. If we're on the short side, that could lead to challenges, as many of us in this room are aware of.
Yeah, the question I have, and to go back for a little bit here, is that geo limit is 57,264,31. approximately 24,099,431 capacity. We're talking about bond issues here of 50-some million, so how do we make that work?
That goes back to the comment I had about the annual appropriation debt. So a portion of this, perhaps one of the projects or some combination of them would be issued subject to annual appropriation.
Does that raise our bond or interest rates on our bonds?
Yep, that was my note in there, that it could be a higher borrowing cost, but again, you're leveraging your very high credit rating, so the impact is minimal. The other piece that is only the next year's budget payment counts against the state limitation. It's a good question.
We need a motion to take a recess.
I think it would be best if we're gonna have people move. If everyone just wants to sit here and read.
Yeah, I just think
we
for,
wouldn't
if we
need to,
just
but-
take 10 minutes and
So
no discussion, but
That's it.
I think we can review it and then come back with some questions. And I'd like to get some copies for the people in the audience. It's been presented now, so I think that it's only fair that we share that information as we have our discussion. So can I get a first and second?
If you guys want to move out, or if you want to just sit here and review it, not talk, that's fine. Okay, you don't need to recess, but if you want to actually recess and have people move around.
I think maybe recess. Everyone can go to the bathroom. There'll be no conversations happening in regards to this. And then we'll come back here at 7:40.
Make a motion, we take a 10-minute
I'll
recess.
second.
Thank you. Okay, Jackie.
Councilmember Hewlin,
Aye.
Parker,
Aye.
Dalby,
Aye.
Schroeder,
Aye.
Beach,
Aye.
Richardson.
Aye.
Folks, bathrooms if needed or
The time is 7:40. I'll go ahead and call this meeting back to order. And Mike, did we want to take public comment first, or do we want to, any questions we have for Mike? Does anyone have any more questions for Mike? Yes, sorry, Mike. You sit down and then we bring you back up.
Hey, Mike, could you please explain appropriation debt? Just
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's a new concept and for the city at least. So as I mentioned, the state of Iowa restricts any property taxing authority to no more than 5% of their assessed valuation and outstanding geo debt at any one time. And when we make debt subject to annual appropriation, what we're saying is we're not pledging all the future payments no matter what, which is what we do in a traditional geo bond issue, which you adopt that resolution, the council at that time, all up to 20 years, all that money is good for, no matter what. You gotta pay it. On annual appropriation debt, the risk transfers each budget year. So the council needs to certify that they are going to affirmatively pay that debt each year. And because of that, only that next budget year's payment counts against the city's state limitation. You can imagine, because that appropriation risk, bondholders want a little more return for that higher interest rate for that purpose. The recourse to the city, especially a city like Indianola, if you were to renege on that payment, if you guys did not appropriate a future year, you would have no credit access. You'd have no ability to finance anything for the foreseeable future. So it's a two-way street in terms of that relationship with investors. Does that answer your question appropriately?
It does.
Yep.
Any other questions for Mike while he's up here?
Not a question, but a comment. Thank you for the great presentation.
Absolutely.
Appreciate all the,
Yep.
it's very thorough. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yep. I'll be there.
I appreciate, yeah, all the detailing.
Don't go far.
We will get you sit down and then back up. Well, there's a lot of people here tonight, so thank you for coming. There's a lot of people in the backfill room too. And I guess the first thing, we'll go ahead and we'll open it up, and we want to hear from the residents and what you have to say on this. And I am sure we will all hear you with open mind. Is that the appropriate way to do it, Doug?
Yeah, you can just open it up for
Okay.
comment based upon the presentation.
All right, just please state your name and your address when you come to the podium.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Janice Comer. I live at 1005 Kensington Court here in Indianola. I'm the Children's and Family Services Librarian at Indianola Public Library. But I'm here tonight on my own time as a resident of Indianola to talk about public safety. Specifically the public safety of kids in the current public library building. The public library is the only city building that's meant almost exclusively for public use. And kids and families actually account for most public library use. In fact, there are more kids and families coming to the library than ever before. Almost 2,000 kids and their families were at events at the public library in the last 5 months. And they also come at other times just to use the children's area in the public library. But the current building wasn't built with kids in mind. The public library doesn't adequately, but more importantly, it doesn't safely serve their needs. There are two main spaces that are used by kids in the public library, the storytime room and the children's area. Though for the monthly programs that are held at the library, the family events that are held there, they're too big to hold in either of those spaces. They actually take over the entire building. And they actually come close to the building's total capacity. It'd be great to have those kinds of events more often, but the current building doesn't have the space to hold them safely while also meeting the needs of other library users. The library does hold story times several times each week, 11 months of the year. There are an average of 50 to 60 people at story time each week during September through May, and that number doubles in the summer to over 100 people each week just at story times in June and July. Most of those people are little kids. They should be safe while they're there. Now, to be clear, there's no dedicated storytime room because there's no other space for it in the building. Storytime is held in one of the rooms that was originally designed to be a meeting room. It's on the opposite side of the building from the children's area, and it's really just the least bad available option for storytime. Now, by far the biggest public safety concern about that space, though not the only one, is that there are no emergency exits. There's not a single window in the story time room, and there's only one door. If there's any kind of an emergency, the kids in that room have only one way to get out. It's just not safe, particularly for kids, and the current building allows no real alternatives. In addition to story time and other events, as I mentioned, kids and families come to the children's area in the public library just to spend time there. They meet friends and they make new friends at the library, and they read and they play and they talk and they just have fun. They should be safe while they're there. The children's area is small, but much more importantly, and the reason that I bring it up tonight, the children's area is completely open to the rest of the library. Now, if you've ever been to any library other than Indianola's, you might have noticed that there was a fun entrance to what is obviously the kids' library. You might walk under a tree or through an archway into a bright, noisy space that's full of kids and all kinds of great stuff. And it's often in a completely different wing of the library, which allows for more noise, but that's not the point. It's standard practice in libraries to have separation between the children's area and the rest of the library, and it's because of safety. The children's area should be clearly separate. It should be clearly visible to library staff, and it should be a place that one has to enter purposefully. It should be clear that this area is for kids and their adults. That means an actual physical distance from the main library areas with some kind of defining barriers and a specific entry point to that area. And it's standard practice for good reason. In the current public library, there is no way to prevent people who have no good reason to be around kids from being around kids. There simply is not room in the current public library to create an appropriately safe children's space that also meets the growing needs of Indianola's kids and families. I don't like to say these things. The public library should be a safe and accessible space for everyone, but particularly for families and kids. And I don't like saying that it's not. It's up to all of us to make sure that it is. But there are serious public safety concerns with the library building. It does not safely serve Indianola's, the public's, growing needs, and council and the community need to know that. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Andy Brittingham. I live at 206 North H Street, and I'm the current president of the Indianola Public Library Board of Trustees. I'm here tonight to voice my support for the resolutions calling for public referendums to authorize bonds for the new public facilities, specifically a new public safety building and a new combined city hall public library. As council is aware, it's taken over 4 years to get where we are this evening. 4 years ago, council recognized the failings of our current city hall and public safety facilities and began the process of looking for solutions. In addition, recognizing the growth of our city, city council identified as our city grew, additional city staff would be needed and at times mandated, such as the case of our new rental inspection program. As city council discussed what to do about city hall and public safety, the library staff and the library board wrestled with the problems identified at the library site. Badly outdated boiler and HVAC systems, which are continually in need of costly repairs, leaking skylights, a roof in need of repair, a parking lot needed repaving, outdated plumbing in the public restrooms, considerable safety and security concerns, not to mention a lack of ADA compliance. In addition to the library's infrastructure problems, quite frankly, the city has outgrown its library. When we look at cities of our size, we are ranked dead last by the state in terms of square footage. Smaller than Newton, smaller than Pella, smaller than Boone, smaller than Oskaloosa, smaller than Norwalk. Why does this matter? Michelle Patrick and our library staff do an amazing job with the resources they have available, but less space means few programs available to Indianola families, fewer public meeting rooms available for community events, and most unfortunately, a smaller collection. When we look at cities with populations between 12 and 15,000, Indianola, Newton, Boone, We see that Indianola has a collection of approximately 43,000 items for its citizens. Newton and Boone have 70,000. Our shelves are full. Nothing can be added to the collection without something being removed. Families from Indianola are traveling to Des Moines and other towns to get access to resources that they can't currently get from their own city library. 2.5 years ago, after a year-long study of city-owned buildings and properties, City Council was presented with several options to address not only the problems at City Hall and public safety, but also the problems that existed at the library. After considering this report, the direction given by City Council in October of 2019 was to move forward with a plan to build new combined City Hall and library building on the library site. With city administration moved, adequate space would be available to renovate and expand the existing municipal building for police and fire. Since that time, focus groups have been held, end users consulted, and community surveys conducted, all designed to gather feedback from the citizens of Indianola and the employees of the city to determine what is needed to solve these problems and expand city services. As you're all aware, this is not the end. No decisions have been made, no blueprints have been finalized. The process of designing these buildings still needs more community input. I'm here as the current president of the library board, but I equally support and recognize the importance of both projects and both resolutions put forward tonight. Our public safety department needs more and better space. The current facilities are far from adequate. Even worse, they have the potential to impact response time and the safety of our citizens, something that should concern all who live in Indianola. To provide police, fire, and EMT services, appropriate support and space, city offices need to move to another site. In my opinion, that site needs to be near the square. As we've learned during past discussions regarding the library, the city and citizens of Indianola have concerns about moving the library away from its current location, and I personally share this concern. The combined City Hall library on the current library site was the best option 2.5 years ago, and it's the best option now. Tonight's decision to place this referendum on the ballot will allow the citizens of Indianola to voice their support, to decide for themselves how they envision the future of Indianola. It will provide them the opportunity to show their support for a project that has the potential to support growth in the city for decades to come and demonstrate to business owners, families, and investors that Indianola is a vibrant and growing community that is planning for its future. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy.
Thank you.
Shayla Rabe, 602 Sunset Drive. Thank you for the opportunity to share my perspective on this very important referendum. I am the president for the Friends of the Indianola Public Library Foundation. My family and I have lived in Indianola for the past 11 years. I personally love volunteering with the library as it is a service that seeks to engage our whole community. I urge the council to let the community decide whether they would like to build a new library, City Hall building, and add the referendum to the ballot of the special election. This issue has been well debated for many years, and in my opinion is likely finally gaining traction 10 years too late. I have personally reached out to all members of the city council and will do my best to briefly address a few concerns that have been brought up to me. The exterior aesthetic. It is my understanding that it is the desire of some new council members to have a building that looks more like the traditional brick architecture of some of the older buildings in the area. I can appreciate that, but would instead point to the revitalized storefronts on the square, as well as the Lauridsen Opera Center, as examples of where Indianola is growing towards. I believe it is a nice blend of old and new. It is also my understanding that the architect for the Opera Center is the same one that will be working on this project. Utilities. It was brought up to me that the glass used on the exterior of the concepts of the building is concerning because of fears with regards to the utility issues at the YMCA. I'm not an engineering expert and assume that a licensed mechanical engineer would be utilized on this project to ensure that the building functions properly. My understanding is that the proposed library City Hall building is completely different than the YMCA. Specifically, it does not have a pool and the heating humidity issues that come with that, nor is it a large open concept building. Large glass office buildings are very common, and I assume that they operate reasonably well to continue being so popular. The parking. In my opinion, this is the toughest issue. Parking is always tight in our downtown district. The library recently hosted Dino Fest, an event geared towards families to learn about dinosaurs. We had over 300 attendees from all over the city. Patrons utilized the city parking lot behind Dental Associates, the parking lot along city streets, as well as our parking lot and the Warren County Administration Building. I do think that we need to ensure ample parking for this area, but I believe the city has several options in place already, and that city staff, along with their team of design professionals, can continue to improve on this solution through the process. One point that no one has brought up was who are we serving the most? I am blessed with high-speed internet at home and a silly number of packages arriving from Amazon on a weekly basis. Many of our fellow community members do not have those luxuries. The library is a safe and encouraging environment for many young minds. And if we've learned anything from the recent pandemic, it's that we all need to help and support to keep our kids learning. Our current facility is grossly undersized for a growing community of our population, not to mention in need of major, very expensive repairs that may be Band-Aids at best. I talk about the kids a lot because I am a mom and my kids utilize our library weekly, but I don't want to leave out all of the other age groups that utilize the library for learning, education, and socialization. Our footprint is small, but our impact in this community is mighty. Again, I want to thank you all for your time and consideration on this matter. Please help move our community forward. Allow city staff and the engineering team to bring a good option forward to the citizens of Indianola. Please let us vote not only for a new public safety building, but a new library and city hall as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Sally Van Doren and I live at 1000 North L Street here in Indianola. Thanks for the opportunity to offer my opinion. 2 years ago, I retired after working 41 years here in Indianola, 36 years as an elementary teacher, 5 years as a children's librarian at the public library. I'm currently a member of the library board as well right now. We've learned about the timeline for improving our city facilities over the last few years. There are definite needs that warrant placing a referendum on the ballot for our citizens to consider supporting. I'm most aware of the needs of the library, where there are long overdue, no pun intended, improvements to be made, making it fully accessible, more space for shelving that would then allow for a larger collection that matches our population, more space for staff work areas, again, matching the size of our community. There's also a need for meeting rooms, both for library programs and community functions. In addition to those items, there are many maintenance needs at our current library building that we've heard many times tonight, those same needs. As I thought about the changes in Indianola over the 40+ years that I've lived here, I recalled former mayor, George Ladke. I found a Des Moines Register article from 1994 after his death that quotes Charles Ginter, the public library's former longtime librarian. Mr. Ginter had just started his new position, and when he met Mr. Ladke, George said, "Libraries are so important. How can I help?" We're at a crucial time where we can help. I hope the council allows our citizens the opportunity to vote on a library plan, which will increase the social and educational experiences for people of all ages in our community. And George would also say, smile, pass it on. Thanks for your time and dedication.
Thank you.
Good evening again. My name is Anita Christensen, and I live at 8918 110th Avenue. I'm here in support of a new library because the city library has had a huge impact on my family. I have fond memories of taking my 4 kids to weekly story time where they were surrounded by other children hearing great stories, followed by a fun craft that was somehow related to the story. We participated in special events like painting the sidewalk and visits from Dan with the PBS reading road trip. Even as my children outgrew story time, we still regularly check out books and participate in the summer reading challenges. I believe we show the value of our local libraries and the reading, learning, and fun that can take place there by promoting it, investing in it, and by supporting the facility, the materials, and the people within it. I believe our public library helped me to teach my children a love of reading and learning. What do you imagine when you think about the quality of life in a community? What activities does Indianola offer for young families and children that bring them to our community? I think of our library, the Park and Recs department, the Park and Recs program, the city parks, and the pool. But the library to me is there's nowhere else in our community that virtually free you can access so many resources and events. Our library was small when my kids were young and had issues many years ago, and I believe it's time to address that. I ask you to add the library to the bond referendum. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anita. Anyone else who would like to take it?
Council. My name is Aaron Hurt. I live at 409 West Pleasantville, a neighboring city. I work for the city. I'm not here to comment on the vote either way, but I did want to give a brief explanation of what the fire department's about and how it serves us, how it serves us serving you. So if I will, I may take a minute. The fire department is a beacon of hope for the citizens. Many times and most often in their darkest hour. The fire department represents a monument of safety and security for the visitors that visit your community. And for us as employees of the city of Indianola and as firefighters, fire department is home. It's a home where we'll spend a third of our life. Every third day, we're here for a 24-hour period. The fire department's a place where we prep and prepare physically for the mission, understanding that we'll have to don 75 pounds of extra equipment and often enter hazardous environments that are quite significantly hotter than the environment that we are initially standing in right now. We'll do that using the weight facilities, and the weight facilities that we currently have and the treadmill are all things that have graciously been donated or given through grants. Fire department's a place where we'll sharpen our skills, and we have a training room that we should just shared facility. It's the Emergency Operations Center. It's a place where we can exercise our skills, and brush up on our knowledge so that we can be in top shape to serve the citizens. It's a place where we can gather around for nourishment for 3 meals a day. Hopefully, if calls aren't going out, that we can gather around together, share a meal. The unfortunate thing about that is that in our current setup, this current establishment, it also connects to the same garage where our apparatus sit that emit fumes and emissions into the garage and into the kitchen where we eat, into the bedrooms where we sleep. It's a place where our gear that has been in fires is off-gassing from the toxic contaminants that have seeped into and occupy our gear. It's a place where we can celebrate our successes, where we can gather around after a call's over and pat each other on the back and recognize what good things we did. It's a place where we evaluate our shortcomings and understanding that we're not perfect and we make mistakes. And even as best as we prepare, oftentimes we have to change things. And so it's a place where we can make changes. We can do that again in that same facility in the kitchen. Sometimes it happens at the tailboard, sometimes on scene. It's a place where we have to mentally prepare to respond for the mission, understanding that we have to be on our best game every time. This is somebody's life, somebody's livelihood that depends on our response, and that our response has to be rapid, it has to be efficient, it has to be effective. And that building that we respond from offers challenges because sometimes the doors don't work, the garage doors won't lift to allow the apparatus out. We have to run across the street, which delays the response to obtain other equipment that's necessary for us to respond to the mission. It's a place where we're often running into doors and opening doors on other apparatus because the apparatus are so tightly packed in the bays. It's a place where we have to scatter for gear because our gear is scattered throughout, which delays the response. It's a place that has been retrofitted so many times that the speaker systems and the things that we need to alert us in the stations just don't exist. It's a place where we can refresh from the response. The locker rooms downstairs that have been probably the newest portion of the building the lockers are all occupied. place where we can wash up and clean the soot and the blood and clean ourselves up so that we can rest for the evenings. And then it's also a place that should offer the opportunity to rise, and it allows us to rest our minds. Again, in a building that has been retrofitted to serve a purpose that it wasn't first built or intended to serve. We've got bedrooms that have been made out of offices. And the building, I can echo the sentiment of most of the firefighters here. The building has been one of the more taxing pieces of equipment that we've had to deal with here. One of the most important that help serve our response to you and to the members of the community. So in ending, I just want to say this, that regardless of what the result is, that I can tell you that we've got a great group of guys here. I mean, awesome group of guys, committed men who are very skilled and talented with bachelor's degrees, master's degrees, who could pick probably just about any other occupation but this, but we do this because we have a passion for this. And I'll commit this to you. I'll say that regardless of what occurs here, what's been promised to us in the past, what hasn't materialized, you have and will always have a committed response from your fire department.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Mike Bethke, and I live at 704 West Scenic Valley Drive here in Indianola. And first of all, I did not plan to speak this evening, but I've been here for 40 years, came in 1982, and some things really jogged my memory today. I've used the library 6 out of 7 days a week, probably since I've come to town, okay? Met Charles Ginner a long time ago when the library is in the Opera Building now. And it's always a comforting place to go and to relax, read, enjoy the environment and atmosphere. So what I'd like to have each and every one of you do is go over to the library on Wednesdays about 2:30 in the afternoon, and you will experience exactly what Janice Comer was talking about. Okay. Now, you've heard a lot about children, and I'm an advocate for children. Most of you know that, but you need to hear from the senior population that uses a library. When you walk into the building, you have 2 entrances. On a Wednesday, I believe, well, maybe it wasn't a Wednesday, but some time ago, right outside that would be probably the south door, where the 2 handicap parking places are, okay? Janice had to park her van, and she had this van full of bags of sand because they were doing an activity that was important for kids and families, okay? She couldn't get the sand in the building. Not a lot of access there. And she's right, when you come into that building, from that door, on a Wednesday afternoon, folks, it's full of kids, and they're having a good time, and they're loud. Now, Charles Ginter used to shh the kids. And I will guarantee you, Janice doesn't have enough staff to shush the kids on Wednesdays at 2:30. Now, as you move on, you get the big TV screen, and it's promoting everything that library does. You turn the corner, and Janice is correct. It opens up to a very large space. There's a deck of computers right there, okay? At times, there's a couple of people that are dealing with political aspects of community life, and they're fairly loud, and I can sit and listen to them, but I don't need to listen to them. But they have no other place to go, okay? One Wednesday afternoon, I was sitting over there reading the paper, and this has literally happened. A gentleman got up, accessed one of the librarians, and said, "It's too loud in here. I can't do my work." And that librarian was very complimentary in terms of what we're trying to do with kids and tried to mediate the situation. And literally, the person got up and walked out. There's no place to go where you can have quiet time to work on the computers, where the kids can be away from people, and where we senior citizens can sit and relax and read the paper. So, folks, 40 years. We've struggled with public safety. We've struggled with that library. And as the gentleman spoke earlier, it's not a problem to solve for today. We want to look and see where we are 5, 10, 15, 30 years down the road in this community, because there'll be somebody else standing at this podium talking to you about what this community needs. It is the face of our community. Every public building we have is the face of our community. And if we want this community to grow and go, then we better put on a good face, taking care of the kids, taking care of the senior citizens, because that's us. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for pointing out it's been 40 years, by the way.
I'm James Hartman, 7552 115th Avenue, not in Indianola, but I use the library. The people just outside of Indianola, this is our home too. And we don't have great internet out there in the country sometimes. So when Verizon and CenturyLink goes down completely, the library is a great place to go to get some work done. Unless there's kids around, I guess. But no, I just want to encourage you all that what you're investing in here is social infrastructure, just as important as your power and your lights and your water. Creating places where people can get together and have conversations and discourse. This kind of thing can happen on the internet, but it generally devolves into shouting matches and just conflict. But getting together, meeting your neighbors, talking to them, having a place where you can see them face to face and really understand what they're saying is an invaluable resource. You must invest in if you want to see continued progress in Indianola. Keeping it short.
Thank you.
Thank you. I do have a quick question. Michelle, do we get paid by the county, right? Unincorporated areas to cover.
County funds.
Okay, I just want to make sure that the people here knew that we do get funds. Well, it's not a lot, but we do get to help out for the unincorporated areas of the county.
Is there any other comments? Anyone check the back room?
Yes, there is nobody back.
No. Okay.
I wasn't planning on it, but I got
Hello, I am Lisa Anderson, and I live at 1703 East Detroit Lakes. So I came to Indianola in 1999. And when I moved around after college looking for jobs, these are the libraries that I have spent time in. Lamar's, Spencer, Boone, Ames, Jewel. Does anybody know where Jewel is?
Yeah.
Okay, I got one more. Webster City and Iowa Falls. Does anybody know where Blairsburg is?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, lived in Blairsburg for a while, went to the Webster City Library, and then went to the Iowa Falls Library. So anyway, libraries are very important to me and my family, whether you are a golfer or you like to go trap shooting or you like to knit. Reading is a hobby that I love and I want my children to love. So libraries are very important to me. Now, I am glad to hear the Boone Library mentioned because I spent a lot of time when I worked for Boone County. It is a wonderful library. And the children's department is one level. They have their own level, their own space. So Mike, you have upstairs. In Boone County, okay? In Boone County, you've got the whole upstairs to read your paper. But also in my time living around the state, our fire is also very important.
And if you look up the history in Boone, they had a fire. It was a very historical fire, like in 1923. And that was the reason why fireworks were outlawed in Iowa for so long. So look that up. Fact check it, please. Okay, but I don't want to stay the course. I want to move forward, and I want better for our community of Indianola. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Susan. Last call.
The only thing I'll note before we close public comment that we did have 14 public comments that came in. I think that were distributed to council at 4 o'clock after the deadline. I know 2 of those public comments did speak here tonight, but there's 12 other ones. So I'll leave it up to council. You've had a chance to review them. If you want them read out loud, we can. Otherwise,
Charlie, I've also gotten a few more tonight.
okay.
And I'm happy to read them. I mean,
We all got
ultimately.
it, didn't we?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Not all of us are retired though, Steve.
The ones tonight,
You
though.
want to be so lucky.
I know.
What were, yeah, well, I guess what were the additional ones tonight? Let's make sure that those are known on top of this. But then again, it's totally up to you if you want them read out loud or not.
Are they're placed in the record though? I mean, will they?
They will
on the
be, yeah.
Website with them, with everything. Okay, then.
Do you want their names or?
Well, I don't know if, I mean, we've seen the ones that came in at 4, but we haven't seen these. So
Yeah.
I guess.
You want their names or just if they're in support?
I don't know. Do you?
Maybe support or
Okay.
against. I
Let
think
me
that's
look it up.
probably the context that's necessary for this discussion.
And one of them spoke tonight. The other 2 are in support as well.
Jackie.
Okay, so then we would do our comments during this section as well too, right?
You-
Close the public.
Do the resolution.
You can do it at the resolution.
Okay.
but
All right,
after the
so
motion.
we'll go ahead and close off those comments. So we do have this in 2 different questions, so we'll try to keep our comments, I guess, germane to the resolution we are on. So 9A, 4B, I need a first and second motion on a resolution calling a county special city election on the proposed issuance of not to exceed 27.7 million in general obligation bonds or capital loan notes for city library and city hall for a
Moved as-
general corporate purpose.
Moved as read.
Thank you. And discussion. Anyone wants to start off with that?
Well, I will say, as being here and been involved in this the whole time we started off. So, as it was mentioned earlier by Mr. Brittingham, that it kind of came, the library part of it, aspect of it came out of the whole facility plan. And we were recognizing the fact that we didn't have enough space in this current facility. I think Aaron mentioned it, that this building that was not built for the purpose that it's being used now. We were running into problems. We didn't have enough. We didn't have any place for large increase of female employees that we had. We just didn't have, they didn't have any office space, lockers. I mean, there was just some things that needed to be done. Well, as we started looking around, what do we need to do to improve everything? That's when the library came along and the city hall. And how that came about is that we were being respectful for the fact as council that, you know, there is only so many funds in the community and trying to use those dollars wisely. And that's why we put together a joint facility. Some would probably say that's not the optimal. And I'm sure the library purists would say that's not the optimal, and the city hall purists, if there are those, would say the same thing. But you know, what we did is we looked at the options that were brought forward to us from the formation group, and their expertise was that, you know, this is the best bang for the buck. We looked at the current library location. A couple reasons. One, it's in the town center, basically. I think people have grown accustomed to that. in my opinion, that's what makes Indianola Indianola. When you hear what is it about Indianola, and it's that character, it's that small town feel, although I hate that word small town, but the small town feel, because we have the town center. You don't have that in Johnston, you don't have that in Clive, you don't have that in Waukee. We have that in Indianola. Ankeny's building, they're trying to make one. We already have it. So I think that's why it was important to look at that facility there and that property, because we already own it. You know, you've heard all these people speak, and we've received, you know, many emails of people's support. And I will tell you, this is the most of all of the 10 years I've been on council. This is the most interaction I've had with the public on anything that we've done. Maybe C Street, that might have been a little bit more, but as far as interaction goes, this is the most responses I've received. And I think tonight what we're doing is giving it to the voters to let them make that decision. You know, the plans that we have are not the final plans. Really, to be honest with you, what we approved tonight is that we just want to put it on the ballot to let the voters decide whether they're going to spend $27.7 million. And that's it. I mean, we really don't have a location. I mean, nothing is tied yet. So we still, once we do this, and then we, you know, then there's going to be some time frame where people are going to have to be educated and show, you know, why this is needed and how inadequate the facilities are and our community's grown, how we can pay for this. And then if it gets approved, which we hope it will, that's when the heavy lifting is going to be, because now we got to design it. Really what's been done so far is that the architects have met with the users and basically figured out what programming do we have now and what are those needs to meet that programming based on standards, building standards from throughout the country. And then where do we look at 20 years from now, 25 years from now, and be able to make sure that we're still meeting those. So at this point, we're really kind of 3 to 5% of the process through. You know, we had CBB meeting the other day at Clive's brand new public safety facility on Hickman Road. I talked to their council member that serves on the board with me, and he said it took him 8 years to get that process, to get that done. Now, in that time frame, they also build a new city hall and library building too. So, and I asked him about that, and he said it's working great. You know, I think we really need to look at it, the fact that the community's asking for this. I think that, you know, we've done as far as we can. Now it's up to the community to move it forward over the line, and then we start planning and do the heavy lifting.
I think one of the key points is working with multiple councils. Like you said, John, it meant we started this process years ago. And unfortunately, there isn't enough time for one council that stays the same in 2 years to do all of this, because it changes every 2 years, usually, depending on, you know, who runs and who's elected and that kind of thing. And as many of you have made so many good points, we have to invest in ourselves. We want to be the best version of ourselves. We need to expect the best for ourselves. And I really feel that, as John also noted, the interest in this topic shows us what the residents, what you as residents, what we as residents want for our community. And I think, again, taking it to the voters is what we need to do.
I guess I would have concerns solely for the fact of, you know, we keep talking growth and where do we see ourselves in the future. For me, you know, having a great library is an asset to a city. So when we're looking at combining City Hall with that library, aren't we then in fact impeaching on the growth of that library in the future? You know, somebody brought up Boone and how their entire first floor is for children. We're not going to have anything remotely close to that, because we're going to have a library upstairs and a City Hall downstairs.
We are going to be maxing out the property. There's no room for growth on that current property. While these plans are tentative, it is 26,000 square feet on a 45,000 square foot lot. How Ferris, I'm sure you know from P&Z, that is not leaving a lot of green space. And as Gwen said, you know, we expect better, and I believe we can do better. I believe that this proposal that is being put in front of us is not the best for Indianola. And that is because it is it seems that we have forgotten what has happened one block away and what the community says about what is in the middle of our square. It is architecturally out of proportion. It has severely had impacts on our business owners. And for anyone who disagrees with me, I would encourage you to speak to all of those business owners. We have weekly meetings with the chamber on that. And we are doing the exact same thing. I have heard from the homeowners that live around there. They are not in support of this. They can see doing a 2.5-story building, because it is 2.5 stories with a lofted children area, is going to not fit in the neighborhood. And it is going to maximize that space out. So if we want to build a 26,000 square foot building, I suggest we find a new piece of property to put it on. Or we look a little bit more creatively and we remove City Hall and we look at city property that we already own. We can look at this creatively. We can create a smaller footprint for that library and do just the library and leave it where it is. And I don't think I need to go into the lack of parking, but the city code does state, even though this is in the downtown zoning district, that we should have somewhere around 115 parking spots to serve that building. It's one spot for 200 square feet. And if we're at 26,000 square feet, you can do the math and that comes out to about where we are. We have 40. Have we not learned our lesson from the downtown? That is my question. Have we not seen our neighbors struggling? Have we not heard from our businesses that are struggling with people coming to their businesses? We can do better and we can give our library a better footprint and model. I support the library. I've actually, since I visited with Michelle with a tour in December 2021, have visited 21 different libraries in Iowa. Anytime I travel to a new city, if time allows, I visit that library. 2 of them out of state. The majority of them were in cities with populations less than Indianola, and overwhelmingly majority were better and had better square footage. The facility was in better shape. So yeah, for a long time, this hasn't been prioritized, and it's a tough position we're being put in right now. We are being put here to pick a winner and a loser. If we go forward with 2 bond issues, is there an inherent risk that both of them fail, especially with the school issue on there and the county talking about a levy increases? Are we all going to fail? And is that what we want for our community? I'll tell you, when we moved here 4 years ago, I didn't look where the city hall was. I didn't care where the city hall was, but what I did do is tour every single elementary school. I did tour the high schools and middle schools. I did call the district office, find out enrollment numbers, graduation numbers, because that's what was important. We love the library. I love the library. There's no debate about that. And overwhelmingly, the libraries I've seen aren't better. But I think we must expect better for that location. And this, when we are going sidewalk to sidewalk with a very modern building, is not better. And I apologize because I know there's been a lot of work put into this, but I think what we have learned is no council is bound by the previous council's decisions. That was very clear last year. So what I'm saying is that I think we go back to the drawing board and we look at how we can make a library that is going to be successful for our community as we grow and is not going to take up the entire block. Go ahead.
I have a
That's all I've
question
got.
for Michelle. I think she's doing something. Did you guys ever bring it forward previously to ever just redo or like do an addition to the current library solely? Or did it just one day it was City Hall library combo?
No, we and by me, I mean the steering committee and the architects looked at a lot of different options. One of the problems we have is to get to the square footage that we need, it really has to be much bigger. It's not a simple, let's put a little addition on. The other piece that we have is that one portion of the library is just not structurally capable of adding on to, has some structural problems. The north side has the footings are falling and there's a lot of issues with that north side of the building. So it's not possible just to add a story, or nor can we just add it, make it longer with just a little addition. But having said all that, in that steering committee, and I would welcome anyone who is on that or the architects to jump in, we looked at many, many options. What if we took this side and we did this? Or what if we did this and we did this? And they were all looked at to see what the different options were.
So another question, as you know, head of the library, have you looked at other functioning city hall libraries combos, which I don't think there's a lot of them. I think I found a few. To see, you know, what their true functionality is after the fact and it, you know, what their plan, maybe what their plans for growth are for their libraries in the future. and how that's
So
affecting them.
it's not that uncommon for different city buildings to be, whether it's the rec center and library, all that, because you do save a lot of money. Clive is a pretty good example of the city hall and the library, and they have, those meeting rooms are really handy to be able to offer that to folks, because city hall needs meeting rooms, conference rooms, libraries need a lot more, but you could save a little money by putting them together. A good example is a program room for doing crafts and stuff. You want it to have a cement floor, you want it pretty indestructible, but then, you know, library board needs a nice room to meet in, and so does city hall. So you put them in the same room. So there's a lot of shared possibilities between putting them together too.
Michelle, I'm sorry, while you're there, have the ADA issues though have been cleared up, correct?
We are grandfathered in. So no, we are non-accessible library, but we follow
But I
code.
know during our meeting, we did measure with tape measure, we measured, you know, that a wheelchair can get it, it's tight. And again, it's not an ideal situation. I think we all agree with that. I really love the red tile though, but it's a terrible setup.
You cannot use the library with dignity if you are handicapped. And we had a longtime patron in today trying to use her walker through the door and into the bathroom. Yes, technically she can get her little walker through, but she can't do it without help and with dignity.
So anyone who wants to have fun should run for city council. It has been
True story.
it has been a long couple of weeks here, and I don't think any of us at this table has taken this issue lightly, because we understand the importance of all aspects that these two buildings mean to our community. I am concerned with what Christina had brought up about pigeonholing future growth. If you measure on the Beacon site from sidewalk to sidewalk, it's 314 feet. The building measurements on the drawings we're giving is 285 feet. I mean, it eats up the entire block east to west. It's also more than half of the depth from north to south. So we are really pigeonholing ourselves to, if John has brought up, you know, wants to be 30,000 by the year 2030. I just, which is a great goal. I just think it pigeonholes us just a little bit by placing this facility on this particular lot. The renderings we were giving, I counted, I think it was 42 spots. 14 spots on the north side. So the entrance is supposed to be on the south side. So it'd be 33% of the parking that's available is on the opposite side of the building. I think it's 7 spots on the west, 7 spots on the east, so it's another 33%, and that only leaves 14 spots that is on the side of the library where the doors go.
There's only 4 now.
Yeah, I don't think 14 is very adequate either, though.
Not for 26,000.
Not for 20, yeah.
We set codes for a reason, and that is why that's.
There was mention too of using that church parking lot, sorry, not to, but
I'm
that
used to
church
it.
parking lot. Has anybody actually spoken to that church to get permission
Yes,
for people?
okay, yeah, sorry. The former city manager, Ryan Muller, had a meeting with them. They were interested in the conversation. It's all high level because, again, I'm gonna step back to this again. We're counting spots. We're looking at exterior. None of that has been decided yet, guys. I mean, all this is just a concept of rendering. It isn't, these aren't final plans. We're how far away from that are? I mean, these are all just concepts.
Is that not what happened with the courthouse? I did not live here when that happened. From what I understand is that.
I wasn't part of that because I was on the city council.
Well, I know, but again, I'm saying
School board, but I was on council.
that was, they went forward with the bond referendum without a really direct plan, it seems. Now, I did not live here, but a lot of people were like, wow. And I've heard former city council people say, well, the thing's massive. I think it's gorgeous.
I would say that whole process was a mess from the beginning. I mean, that thing was a nightmare.
That's
and-
not why we're here tonight.
But that's,
No,
but
but
that
I'm
has
saying-
been
I mean,
right.
we're getting so
Again-
far off of where we are on this agenda,
Thank you.
very far off it. And I just want to say, we've spent the last 4 years, I wasn't even on council when these discussions began. However, the baton has been passed and new council has come. We owe it to our residents, in my mind, to allow them to vote. Whether everybody supports it or not, it's really our residents' decision. So I don't know if it is appropriate now, but I'd like to call the question.
I've got some
If
comments,
that-
to make, and I don't think Ron's finished.
Yeah.
either.
Let's
Okay.
finish up then and we won't interrupt her. We'll let you have your comment.
She called the question. No, I'm just kidding.
I
She
can't.
can't.
Okay.
There's no doubt our facilities are inept. I mean, you can walk through them and just look at it and know they are inept. Well, one thing we really haven't talked about though is the tax burden to the taxpayers. Just in the course of the last 2 decades, median home prices have increased by 133%. Purchasing power has decreased by 38 cents. So what we're able to buy as consumers is getting less. As Mike had mentioned, we're possible inflation. I just think, what may be a $400 tax increase on my taxes, maybe I can afford it, but to my neighbor, maybe they're not able to afford it. I just think we need to look at the financial situation of it as well.
I think all the points on both sides of the issue are good points and well taken. But to go back to, I would love to have a brand new library, a brand new public safety building, and a brand new city hall. That's what I would really like. I think that's what would be a great base of our community. But we don't have the money for that. And so, as Heather mentioned earlier, several years ago, qualified people put together the best plan that they could put together with our needs and living within our budget, so to speak. Like Michelle mentioned, many alternate or possibilities were considered. And not that we couldn't look at others, as you mentioned, not that we couldn't look at others, that's going to take more time, which is going to delay the process. And then you'll have a new council who might not agree with this. It goes on and on and on. And that's why 20 some years later, we're looking at the same problem. I spoke with someone today who said in 2000, she started working on this. And here 22 years later, we still don't have improvements for the library. We still don't have a new city hall. We still don't have public safety improvements. It may not be the perfect solution. I wouldn't die on that hill, but we have to do something. We have to do something for public safety and the library and the city offices. And it seems to me to be the best solution. Nobody wants to spend money. Nobody wants to pay more taxes, but we all want to have the amenities, and we are woefully behind our.
Let's just say, you said that, it's not the perfect solution, but if it's not the perfect solution, why are we gonna spend $27 million doing it?
I think that's like anything, take it to your personal level when you're adding on a bathroom, remodeling or whatever. It's not what you want, but it's what you can do at the time. And we have to do something. We have to do something, and we've hired qualified professionals to present some good options. So that's my view.
I think most of you folks that emailed us, I gave a response to just about everybody. And Shayla, you addressed some of the issues in your comments that I proposed and talked to you about. I think we're settling. I think we're settling for an option because we've been so long without a library that everybody's saying, well, this is the best we can get, the best we can do. I think I'm kind of with the mayor on this. I think we can do better. I think that, first of all, my first question to council is, we don't have a date on this. Are we talking September 13th? Is that what we're talking about on this bond issue?
Yeah, it's in the resolution.
Okay. I've got to be honest with you that I've talked to a lot of people. I've talked to business owners. I've talked to former library board members. I've talked to current board members, or at least emailed them, got some response for some folks. We've got the best staff around. And I thought one comment from one former library board member was so appropriate. She says, people probably in the community don't realize how inefficient our library really is because we have such a great staff that makes it work. And I agree with that wholeheartedly. And I believe we do need a new library, but I think we're settling. I don't think this is the right option at the right time. To go back to the point that was made about this is a concept and all of these other kinds of things, I have to be honest with you. I was on the council in 2006, 2010. We started working on the YMCA building. We had a design. We had specific plans that we went to the voters with. And if you don't have specifics to go to the voters, how do you explain to the people that you want to vote yes on that particular bond issue what you're looking at? How do you explain, well, this building's really not going to look like what was put in the paper? How do you explain the parking issues? How do you explain the fact that we are now asking people that come, 300 members that come to a Ladino event, park in city parking lots and the county parking lot, when business owners are struggling today and asking us on the other side of the issue, we don't have any parking spaces in the lots that we currently have. So the real issue for me is a lot of issues. I think we're settling. We can do so much better in this community. Yes, I know it's been a long time and we've done a lot of things, but I've got to be honest, we really can do a better job. Most of the libraries that are built today are built on a single story. And if you have a city hall that's built with the library, they may not connect, they may connect, they may have an inner foyer, they may have some other things, but they are on a single story. The other things I've been considering, and Charlie answered this question earlier, is that even though there's been some discussion with somebody on the Methodist Church board or the pastor or somebody, at one time, when you talk to people today, there's never been a discussion. We don't have an agreement. We don't have an agreement with that. So now you're still going to ask people on a day when you've got 300 people in the library to park either on the street, in city parking lots, or in the county parking lot. Folks, is that the best we can do? That's really the question I have for you. Is that the best we can do in this community? You know, the mayor's right. You know, even though we're not in a zoning where the square has its own zoning. So I get it. We don't have to follow the parking regulations of the city for government buildings. But a library is critical. You know, Mike talks about elderly folks, you know, and I'm getting close to where Mike is. So, but I got to say, you've got to have parking spaces close by. In wintertime, those folks don't have the opportunities to walk like everybody else does. I mean, they do, but they don't. You know, I find myself today with catching myself for not having the balance I used to have when I was 16 years old. And so you've got to have a parking for that. The design, I get it. It's all tentative. Everything's out there. And haven't we learned our lesson on that? If we're going to go to the voters, we've got to have something concrete in place. Now, I will tell you this, as far as the public safety building is concerned, we've seen an exterior design. It's not technical, but I've seen some interior drawings. We didn't get a chance, 3 of us anyway, didn't get a chance to see anything about the library until about 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago, when Andy and other folks from the library sat in on a meeting with Mike on the money side of things and from the architectural team. So I think if you know, John, you mentioned the fact that this is the most people that ever contact you. Wait till we get into sidewalks, if we ever get into the sidewalk issue. And that's back to Ron's question. Folks, we can do better. We can do better. It may take another year. It may take a city manager, and that's another question I have, is we're kind of rushing this forward here. We're going to go to a bond issue in September, basically about 4 months away, with a new city manager, and everybody's going to come in and do those kinds of things. But yet we're rushing this along. I get it. I understand why. You know, this should have been done, and the timetable set for September of 2021. It should have been done then. That's when the vote should have taken place. You know, it should have taken place then. But now we're here. And so you've got 3 of us anyway, and I know the others are too, asking a lot of questions, as we should. And we have to, because we got to get brought up to speed on this kind of thing. I just can't support this today because I know we can do better on a public library. I know we can do better.
So I have a question for you then, Steve.
Yep.
So in doing better, then where will the money come from? And realistically, you know, it'll delay it more than a year.
Great
Like,
question.
This has taken 5 years. to
Great
do.
question. Here's the issue for me. Mr. Lynn, how was the last library funded in 1984? You sent me an email on that. Okay, well, you sent me an email and I asked you specifically, and I asked
It was
others.
funded by $800,000 of privately raised dollars
privately
and one
raised
large
money.
investor of $75,000. The city did not, we do not have any history that the city contributed financially to it. We are not asking for the library board to come up with $27 million.
Kathy, what did you say earlier about when the library was built? It was
I was
too
on that
small.
committee. First of all, it was too small. to
Too
begin
small,
with.
yes.
And the second of all, a lot of people ended up contributing.
If I may, Joyce Godwin, retired, 1111 West Boston, retired library director, never wanted to be at one of these meetings again after I retired. From Charles Ginter, who I did not immediately succeed, but the library was built in 1984, total of $900,000, $700,000 of that raised from public fundraising. The city contributed $200,000. It never went to a public vote. It has never been a public vote.
Right.
We were given 800,000 in private funds and 75 it doesn't matter. Regardless, I'm glad to know the city did contribute.
Budgeted, and I believe the library came in at under $900,000 under budget.
Right. And my mother was mayor when that was built. She told me soon after it was built that it wasn't sufficient.
Again,
But-
I think as Steve said, and I think we'll wrap this up and do a vote. I think as Steve said
When you
is,
choose to.
well, unless there's more to discuss here, but
Oh, I could go on for hours.
I think what Steve said is, I mean, if somebody was sitting here from the council, why didn't it go in September 2021? Nobody's given us any
Probably because there
reason.
was an election and everybody was all skittish. I wanted to go because I
So we
wanted to
didn't
get
want to
this
make it
done.
an election issue. Well, that's a poor reason. for
No,
not
no,
doing
it
in
wasn't that. I was
September
one
2021.
of six. Again, mind you, there are all six of us up
Yeah.
there. I wanted to move ahead because that's that important that we move this ahead. I think your arguments, every one of them can be done. You tell me of a project, especially a public project that has a finished set of plans before you go to a bond issue.
I didn't say it was-
Steve, you know how expensive that is?
I didn't say a finished set of plans, John. We had a design, we had to know what the outside was gonna look like, and we had a true concept. Now, you've got that with the public safety building as well. We've got an idea where rooms are
Right,
gonna be
right,
and
and
those
those
kinds
can
of things.
change. I mean, things
I
can
understand that,
change.
but we had a real concept, and that didn't change. In fact, what most people voted on, or what the people voted on for the YMCA is what we got.
Was the public authority to spend the money. That's what was voted on, and that's what we're asking to do tonight.
But that building that was the design was put together, and we had that to go to the public to sell it and get a vote.
In my opinion, this is a 2-for-1 issue, and if this goes down, the other one's going down too, so.
It is.
That's my opinion. as
Because
well.
that's gotta be a regroup, because you can't do one without the other.
I
I would
disagree.
agree. I don't,
Oh, I
I don't,
totally
and I don't
disagree
think
with
it's our
that.
decision to
Came
decide
about.
which is
I think
more
we're gonna go
important.
ahead and we're going to do a roll call on this. I don't think the conversation is going any better.
Councilmember Dalby,
No.
Schroeder,
Aye.
Beach,
No.
Richardson,
No.
Hewlin,
Aye.
Parker.
Aye.
Motion fails 3-3. Moving on, I need a first and second motion on a resolution calling a county special city election on a proposed issuance of not to exceed 34.5 million in general obligation bonds or capital loan notes, public facility, safety facility for general corporate purposes.
I make the motion.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you.
Might as well do the vote now, because there's no reason to have any conversation.
Well, I think
This is
there is,
ridiculous.
because I think there is a reason to have a conversation, and the reason is this.
It's not gonna pass.
John, I think we're gonna try to be respectful of everybody's
Right,
opinion
okay.
here. So we'll let Steve finish and then you can rebuttal.
I think the conversation is that we have a public safety building that needs to be here. I understand the concern about the administration building, the city hall portion of that. I think we've got a lot of options we can talk about in the future. I think we've got a new city manager coming in that may have some ideas on that as well, and be able to help us to move forward with the library that we can do, that we're going to be proud of, and it's going to be useful for us. I don't think it's good to vote against a public safety building when we've got situations here that we need to have firefighters not run a block over here to a building Yeah, I
Totally
agree.
agree.
So then don't vote against
By
it.
saying
Well,
that they
we-
have to be voted
Right, but-
together,
yeah,
you're saying
that's
that
the way it came
the
about.
safety of the people in this city
Yeah.
is less important
No,
than a
has nothing to
library.
do with that at all. This came
It-
out
it
of that whole
100%
thing. Be able to share some services and be able to share some programming out there and be able to use that building for a facility for City Hall, that's fine as well, for temporary issues. But I think I think these two issues do not have to be inexplicably tied together. I think you can vote separately on these issues and move forward.
With all due respect, I don't think you should be having all those conversations. I think that is a group decision. We should all be involved in those conversations.
I've not talked to anybody particularly. I've just been asking some questions and finding out whether or not those things might be a possibility.
Well,
I would
don't-
encourage all of us to have those
I
conversations.
don't want a Band-Aid fix moving City Hall to the West Roads building or the Parks and Rec or the YMCA or all that.
But
we
you're
have to have
gonna
a plan.
Band-Aid fix it to put it with the library.
We have to have
That's not a Band-Aid
It's
fix.
not
It's
a
a
Band-Aid fix.
30-year plan.
Professionals have
Jesus.
studied this and worked for years to determine this. And then we're gonna piecemeal our city offices with the new city manager into some temporary housing.
So then let's look at the current public safety building. Is there something that we can do there in the space provided? I mean, you've already talked about options. You've talked about a concept.
Do we need a fancy city hall? Absolutely not. We can be in any building. I don't think it matters if it is a beautiful building, but there's lots of opportunities we have. And I think we can be creative and maybe it costs us $1 million or $2 million. And then maybe that library is, and John, I know you just kind of snickered there, but I'll
Yeah,
tell you
I
why
did.
say that. From a renovation standpoint, I had a great conversation last week with Alicia Barkas, and we did have a preliminary. We're trying to figure out how the YMCA can stay in Indianola and we can support that as a city. And so does that mean that possibly we can do some joint programming together? Alicia was all about it. We were just throwing ideas. None of these are decisions being made. We were just throwing ideas at the wall. And maybe none of them stick, but we have to have preliminary conversation.
You know, those conversations were had clear back when the Y opened up. We
Well,
encouraged the
Alicia
city
was
staff.
not in her position as CEO then. She came in a very financial straits time and has done great work. I'll give the YMCA kudos. They paid off their equipment loan this past week. That was exciting. And so they are working to try and be a partner with us. And again, I just think that we can look a little bit more creatively. And Ron, do you have anything you'd like to add or Heather?
I'm fine.
Mayor, I would say, John, in response to your comment about that was decided when the YMCA was built, that's not true. I mean, the idea was to keep them separate. In fact, Bob Kramer on the council at that time was very adamant about making sure that
I was on council when it opened. We talked about that.
With Bob,
That we wanted to share. In fact, Doug would remember,
Maybe
he
you-
had those meetings.
but in the
What
initial
programming they could
conversation,
do better than what we could do.
but in the initial conversations to go to vote on that, Bob Kramer was very adamant about the fact that they separate the two, and I'm glad you guys did have those conversations. So if you've had those conversations,
And there has been crossover. There was nothing formally.
But we're way off base here, so.
Yeah, that's a really old conversation.
Yeah, things change, just like a new council. So we have new ideas as well, and hopefully we can work together. So Jackie, I'll go ahead and have you call the roll on that.
Councilmember Hewlin,
Nay.
Parker,
Nay.
Dolby,
Aye.
Schroeder,
Nay.
Beach,
Aye.
Richardson.
What a damn shame. What a damn shame.
Okay, so I guess we need to move on. Motion fails 3-3. I need a first and second motion authorizing, well,
we don't have
we
that.
don't need to do it.
No, there's no way.
I've been not having my agreement on for a year to wait for today's discussion. I still want to work with you guys on solutions going forward.
Yep.
It'd be customary to have that.
Thanks,
Yeah.
thanks.
I'll make a motion to approve the resolution authorizing the execution of an engagement agreement with DA Davidson.
Second.
Councilmember Dolby,
I'm gonna look stupid here, but what the heck am I voting on?
It's basically continuing our relationship with DA
Oh.
Davidson as our financial advisors.
Aye.
Schroeder,
Aye.
Beach,
Aye.
Richardson.
Aye.
Hewlin,
Aye.
Parker.
Aye.
We'll move into Charlie, but before we move into that, I would like to apologize to our public safety department that is all here because you are a casualty
Yeah.
of a vote that was made completely off base. So
Or strategically.
Same with the.
life
Yeah.
and death,
Yep.
but I
they didn't
guess
say anything
life
about
and
any
death
of the
doesn't
people that
matter.
attend the
So
library.
Charlie, why don't you go ahead
Been
and
focused
John,
with this the whole time.
John,
You know what? I've
Stop.
listened to you guys do this the whole time you've
stop,
been.
John, you are out of order completely. You are not being respectful of anybody else. Go ahead, Charlie.
Just a few quick things. We got notification from Bird Scooters last week that they're looking to relaunch in the next few weeks here. So they've got their new person up to speed, so they should be back here in a couple weeks. Next Tuesday, May 10th, we are having a visit from the Iowa Economic Development Authority. I think some on council are aware that we have been attempting to do a certified site with the property that was rezoned here a few months ago. So they're actually doing a site visit as part of that process next Tuesday. And then, council's aware the DC trip for the Des Moines Partnership is coming up next week. We do have orientation for that tomorrow. And then we do have a meeting with Warren County Economic Development Corporation and all the Warren County entities that are going to be attending that to have a strategy session with them. So make sure that everybody had that information.
Thanks, Charlie. Can I get a motion to adjourn? Second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye. I'd have this.